Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. This is a very exhausted Tim Ferriss, and welcome to the Tim Ferriss Show. So glad to have you. You know, I am one tired son of a bitch right now, and I couldn't be happier about it because I've been flying around the country doing various experiments, and I had the opportunity to go to Palm Beach, Florida, to sit at the home of Tony Robbins and ask him just about everything I've ever wanted to ask him. And this is a very special interview for me. This is the interview, the conversation I've wanted to have for 15 years. And now that I'm back in SF, gathering myself, drinking some what appears to be Laughing Coyote tea. I have no idea what's in it. Could be all sorts of drugs, psilocybin. And I'm thrilled to be putting this out there for you because Tony is a fascinating character. For those of you who don't know him, he has consulted or advised leaders including Nelson Mandela, Mikhail Gorbachev, Margaret Thatcher, and Mother Teresa. He has consulted members of 2 royal families, the U.S. Congress, U.S. Army, U.S. Marines, 3 U.S. presidents, including Clinton, and other celebrity clients would include names you know, like Serena Williams, Andre Agassi, Greg Norman, of course, the golf legend, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Oprah Winfrey, who calls him superhuman. The stat that always just sends my head spinning is that Tony has developed and produced 5 award-winning infomercials. That's, of course, how a lot of people came to know of him. And these infomercials have continuously aired on average every 30 minutes, 24 hours a day, somewhere in North America since, check it out, April 1989. It's just Tony TV out there, 24/7. Insanity. This particular conversation is broken into basically 3 parts. The first third of our very long conversation involves me asking him the questions I've always been dying to ask him ever since I first was exposed to his material. And I explain a lot of the background, which is kind of hilarious when we get started. The second third and the third would, and of course, along the way, we talk about his daily routines, the types of questions that he asks world-class performers, and so on. The latter portions of this focus on what Tony has been researching and really teasing apart and analyzing for the last several decades, but especially the last 4 years. And that is, how do you master the game of money? Why is there so much financial illiteracy? And how do you stack the deck so that you can win? Because there's a lot of hijinks and there's a lot of nonsense out there. How do you actually invest? What do you do with your money? And it's a huge topic, but he has interviewed and in fact coached some of the most unbelievable minds in the world of finance and investing. I couldn't believe the list, including people like Paul Tudor Jones, Ray Dalio, who's of course a whiz in the world of hedge funds. And the list is unbelievable. Carl Icahn, David Swensen, who turned $1 billion into, I think, $23 billion for Yale. Some curious characters like Mark Dr. Doom Faber, Sir John Templeton, Kyle Bass, who became very, very famous for, in effect, predicting and shorting the subprime crisis, or at least he made his fortune, one of his fortunes, in seeing that through the looking glass. These are the Navy SEALs, the top of the top, and he has been able to ask them just about everything that you would want to ask them. And a lot of what Tony's going to say is controversial or counterintuitive. No doubt you'll disagree with some of what he says, but I guarantee you, even if you don't care about investing or you think you don't care about investing, and by the way, if you've decided not to think about investing, that is a decision in investing. I guarantee that if you listen to this entire conversation, which I plan to listen to over and over again, it has a lot of information, that you will take away at least 1 or 2 things from Tony that lead you to say, holy shit, I've never looked at that aspect of my life that way. and it'll turn things upside down, and you will walk away with a completely different lens through which you can look at how you're living, how you're handling your business. And I think you will find tremendous value from this single interview. So I will leave it at that. I don't want to oversell it. I will say that for me, Tony can be an intimidating guy just in sheer size. He's a big dude, and he can actually palm my entire face. And we have a photograph of that I'll share, but I get into that in the interview. He's also a very seasoned pro, and I have a lot of respect for him. So it takes me 5 or 10 minutes, I'd say, let's just say 10 minutes to find my feet in this interview. When we hit our stride, then all sorts of gems come out. And there's a lot of good material in the beginning, but give it some time. Be patient. Listen to this whole thing. It is worth your time. So without further ado, I think I've had too much Laughing Coyote tea. Here's Tony Robbins. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is Tim Ferriss. Welcome to another episode of The Tim Ferriss Show. I have a very exciting episode for you and a very exciting guest, Mr. Tony Robbins. Tony, thank you for having me in your home, of all places.
I'm glad to be home. That's a rare thing, much less to have you here. Grateful to have you here as well.
And we have many different topics. I have many different questions I'd love to delve into. Of course, I, perhaps unbeknownst to a lot of my fans, have a long history with Tony Robbins, but not in person. This is the first. And for those of you who don't know some of the background, when I first graduated from school and moved to Silicon Valley to chase the billions that seemed just that were being handed out in 99.
They were in 1999.
In 1999, they were in a way. And I was driving a hand-me-down, beat-up green minivan from my mom. The seats got stolen from inside, or at least the back. So all my coworkers started harassing me and calling it the molester-mobile. And the job, the company didn't seem to be a long-term fit for me. And when I was on a road trip at one point, I bought Personal Power. It may have been Personal Power 2.
Yes.
And I started listening to it to and from work on my commute, which is terrible for those who don't know the Bay Area. If you're on 101 between San Jose and SF, it's horrible. And ultimately, that was one of the catalysts for me starting my first company. So,
wow. I'm really touched. Knowing all that you've done, that really touches me completely, because you've been an inspiring character to me. Not the 4-hour work week, because I'm looking for the 4-hour sleep week at this stage. I'd like to be able to pull that one off. But really, I think the way you attack subjects, and that's what you do. You don't look at them. You go after mastery of them, and the way you experiment and the way you constantly dig underneath to find the organizing principles. I feel a kinship with you. We're in different stages of life and things like that, but I have enormous respect for you. And I don't feel that way about everybody. I like everybody, but I don't respect everybody. You deserve the respect, because you go deep. Most people are really, they're surface level in what they do. So I'm excited to chat with you and see what can come out of this conversation.
Thank you, for sure. And I have, of course, a bunch of self-interested questions that I think will also be interesting to other folks, hopefully. But what's always impressed me about your entire career and the results that you've achieved is how far you've been able to take it in terms of working with, say, the top 1% of performers in the world. And I read in your new book, which everyone should take a look at. We'll be delving into it a lot more as we progress in the interview. But there was a quote from Mr. Benioff, Salesforce, who credits you with effectively, if there were no Tony Robbins, there would be no Salesforce.com.
That's a big claim to make. I don't think he might have told me exaggerated, but he kind of walked me through, because it started very much like you, him on the freeway in Silicon Valley every day listening.
And you get these, you're able to reach such a high caliber of individual when you meet with such people, whether they're presidents, athletes like Serena Williams, Agassi, actors like Hugh Jackman, whoever it might be. Benioff's quote was, Tony said to me that the quality of my life was the quality of my questions. So what I would be curious to know is, when you meet with these top performers, where do you start? What are the questions that you ask them?
Well, I ask questions before I meet them. Mm-hmm. The question I want to ask before I meet them is, who are they? What are they made of? What are they after? What's preventing them from getting it? Where are their wounds? What is their deepest pride? Not in a negative way, like what are they proud of? Mm-hmm. Try to find as much as I can in advance so that I can be really effective and efficient when I meet them. Mm-hmm. When you meet somebody, yourself, myself, the most valuable thing we have is our time. So I try to be beyond respectful of that, but also I load my brain with all the distinctions I can so that when I enter into an interaction with someone and we're engaged, I have a disproportionate amount of information, ideas, insights, wisdom available to me. And then I can react to what's really happening in this moment. So I have what I think in advance, and then I have what the moment shows me. And I think the blend of that is really valuable, because in the moment, people can show up in all kinds of ways.
Right.
Somebody can show up, the meanest person on earth can be kind in the moment.
Yeah.
The kindest person can be very mean in the moment.
Right.
So I like to grab both those. And then what I want to do when I meet them is I want to try and understand what is it that they really need, not only what they want.
Right.
Because what you want, I'm sure you've experienced this. I have in my life gotten what you want, and then you're like, is that what there is? It's like, what the hell? Right. Because what really makes us fulfilled as human beings is what we need. And there's only so many needs. So I dig under what the needs are. I look at what's their model of the world, how do they approach meeting those needs. And every model has limitations and challenges, mine, yours, anybody's. And so that tells me before I even meet them where the real challenge is. And then I listen for what the surface challenge is. And my goal is solve the surface challenge, but also give them more than they bargained for, solve the deeper challenge. And ultimately, my goal is that they have a greater quality of life. And most people I work with have an extraordinary quality of life. They may not realize it. They may have forgotten it. They may have lost track of it. Unless I'm dealing with somebody, which I also deal with, who's, coming back from Afghanistan with PTSD, and they got light sensitivity and they can't sleep at night. They wake up in cold sweats and they're shaking while they're talking to me. That's a different game. Boom. That's something that's got to be dealt with in a different way. But when you're talking about peak performers, their challenges are usually they're hungry for more. Right? That's the nature of probably people listening to this. If they're going to listen to Tim Ferriss, they're going to listen for more. It's like, give me something beyond what everybody else is talking about. And then you're always seeking to try and find that by not limiting it to yourself, same as myself. Let's go find whoever's best in these areas and let's pull it together, and let's find the organizing principles that codify this. So I'm looking to figure out, what is that more that they want, or what is it that's stopping them? And then I go into the experience and just absorb what's there. And the combination of the two is how I'm able usually to get pretty extraordinary results. But without the prep, what most people know about me is the level of prep I do. Right. Like I can get up and with my pinky do 6 days in a row without, a note or anything of that nature at this stage. That's not intelligence. That's experience. That's the 40,000 hours, not 10,000 hours, over the years. But, I still prep because what I do is I activate in my nervous system that knowledge base of what I want to be able to serve somebody with. I try to bring that to the surface so it's readily available. It's the difference between emotional intelligence and what I call emotional fitness. Emotional intelligence is the capability to deliver something. Fitness is the readiness to be able to make that happen. So I'm more interested in being emotionally fit or being emotionally fit for that person in the moment.
And when you interact with people, for instance, Paul Tudor Jones, legendary investor and trader, or Agassi, or anyone who's at the peak of their game and suddenly enters a slump, what are the commonalities, if any, that you've spotted in the best of the best who then cease for a period of time being the best of the best? What triggers that type of downslope?
Well, everybody's got different triggers. There's some common patterns. And one pattern is doing so well that you go beyond your vision. And, it's the astronaut syndrome. What do you do, when you're 31 years old, you flew to the top of the mountain, you've been on top, literally looked back at the earth and saw that picture we've all seen photographed, come back, shake the president's hand, have the ticker tape parade. And, okay, now what do you do with the rest of your life? Right. And so most of those astronauts, if you know their histories, they went through some really tough times. Some were alcoholics, some got addicted to prescription drugs. And so, in some cases, that's why I enter people's worlds, is they've done so well. They've called the market, almost hour by hour, a week in advance, and they made more money in a day than most people have ever dreamed of when everybody else lost their shirt. Right. And everybody's want to know what to do. Okay, I've done that. Now what do I do after I've called the market during the worst day in history? Most people lose momentum then, or they get distracted, because it's like, we need something to go for. We all need what I call a compelling future, something that will get us up early and keep us up late and excite us, at least the nature of a high performer. And if you don't have that, life feels very dead for those people. And so, the President of the United States, I remember Bill Clinton saying to me, I was with him in Aspen, and I was there at a fundraiser, and he asked me to come visit him, and he threw me in the car and said, come down the hill with me. It was one of those serene moments, and the lights are flashing. We come down Red Mountain in Aspen, if you know the area. And he's sitting across from me, and it's right after the blue dress incident had come out. And he says, Tony, it's just like, I'm still so young. He said, what am I going to do when I leave? I'm not, what am I going to do in my 50s? That's just the wildest thing. I said, if I were you, I'd get the hell out quick, because he's talking about, I'd run a third time if I could. And I was teasing him about it. But he found a compelling future. And Bill Clinton today has something even greater in his life that he's going for. So the slump shows when people outrun their vision, or the slump can show when they meet their vision, but it's not fulfilling, or the slump shows when people just end up developing some patterns they're unaware of that cost them. And it can be such a small thing with an athlete that can occur. And sometimes it shows, like a Tiger Woods, when something happens in their emotional life. And while they try to say, I'm an athlete here and I'm a human being over there, they don't separate. And so what I got to do in those situations, regardless of what triggered it, is I've got to come in and get them to re-anchor in their nervous system what made them so effective. And you understand myelin, the idea that the more you do something, the more you wire yourself. It's like the myelin, the white portion of the brain. It's almost like if I do something over and over again, I literally wire myself with this myelin. It's like having high speed, cable in there, or whatever the appropriate, I don't know what it is anymore, what high speed really is these days, the proper term, but versus, having dial up. If you do something over and over again, you can process so much more rapidly. So I will find where is that myelin in that person? What specific pattern will hook them back up again to that part of their brain where it's effortless, to that part of the brain where they instate and they don't even think. Andre Agassi was decades and decades ago. He'd been number one in the world. And all of a sudden he dropped, I don't know, it was number 19 or something at that stage. It's like 90, 91, 92, whatever it was. And nothing worked. And nothing worked because he kept working on his swing and he kept working on his wrist. And he was really upset with his father, who was his coach. Yeah. There was all these dynamics going nobody wants to talk about. He was actually to the point that he shared later on that he was thinking about quitting, playing the game. This is really early in his career. And, he's gotten injured. And Andre was very frustrated. And Brooke Shields brought him to me. They were just dating at that time. And he said, I don't need positive thinking. And he said, you know what? Tony's not positive thinking. He's going to show you these strategies. So he comes to me. I sit down with him. And I said, Andre, he's telling me about how he's doing this. I said, think of a time you hit the tennis ball perfectly. I said, don't think about it. Go to it. I got him in state, got him kind of in that place where the myelin's being fired off. And then I said to him, okay, you feel that? You feel that? Yeah. I said, were you thinking about your wrist? He says, no. I said, then how the hell would you think you would ever get back to that peak form of focusing on your wrist? Right? So I've got to get them back into the pattern that made it work. And then oftentimes I've got to help them resolve some other issue that's distracting them, that is something else in their life that's pulling them apart from peak performance.
His story is an amazing one. Open, the autobiography, is one of the best I've ever read.
Yeah, that's wild.
It's such a fantastic book. So looking at the longevity of your career, the scope and scale of the Tony Robbins empire, so to speak, your endurance has really impressed me. And so I'm wondering, after these decades, what are some of your daily routines? For instance, what do you typically eat for breakfast, if it's up to you?
Yeah, I have salad and fish. It's like standard. I'm boring as hell, because I just know it's fuel.
Yeah.
Before I met my wife, we've been together for more than 15 years. I was completely anal. I was like, I hadn't had chocolate. I hadn't had ice cream in like 15 years, right? It was just crazy. And then she came into my life, and I'll never forget, I thought, God, this woman's incredible. She's a phlebotomist. She does the blood. She's an acupuncturist. She's a nutritionist. We're having these green drinks, and we had this lunch, and afterwards she ordered a hot fudge sundae, and I thought, what in the hell are you doing? She goes, living, you bastard. So she loosened my ass up just a bit, which was great, because I loved her. So she calls it zigging and zagging. We zig, 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 and then she zags, or we zag. And when I was first with her, I was like, you're zagging. We were traveling through Europe, Rome and Italy and various parts of France, south of France. And I was like, you seem to be zagging every day. And she goes, well, I'm on vacation. And then later on, we were traveling. I said, the problem is we're always traveling, so you're always on vacation. But she's fit as hell, in great shape. But I'm fish and salad. I'm a high greens, protein type of guy, very low carbs. But my regimen is I start with something to strengthen and jolt my nervous system every frickin' day. I will sometimes ease into it. I'll go in the hot pools. I'm fortunate enough to have multiple homes. My home in Sun Valley, I have natural hot pools that come out of the ground, just steaming hot. And I go in the hot pools, and then I go there in the river. Here, I go in a 57-degree, plunge pool that I have. And I have one every home I have, every one of them in Fiji.
Immediately upon waking up?
Waking up. It's just like boom, every cell in my body wakes up. And it's also just like training my nervous system to rock, that there is I don't give a shit how you feel. This is how you perform. This is what you do. Even when I'm taking vacation, I do it. It's just, I don't know. Now I like it. I like that that simple discipline that reminds me the level of strength and intensity that's available at any moment. Even if I'm relaxing, I can bring that up at will. It's myelin.
Right.
I also have a cryotherapy unit in all my homes. Have you tried cryotherapy?
I haven't.
You know what it is?
Maybe you could elaborate. I mean, I can put the two words together and probably guess.
Oh my God! With all that you do, you're going to love this. I'm surprised. I'm glad I'm teaching Tim Ferriss something for the first time.
I've done ice baths. Oh, not the first time.
Oh, ice baths suck. Ice baths suck. Trust me. I'm on stage in a weekend. I do my Unleash the Power Within program, 3 days. It's 50 hours.
Yeah.
You've never been to an event. You got to come as my guest to an event sometime.
I would love to.
But I'm going to give you an idea. People won't sit for a 3-hour movie that somebody spent $300 million on, and I got like Usher or Oprah going on, Tony, I love you, but 2 hours most I can do. And 12 hours later, Oprah's standing on a chair going, this is the most incredible experience of my life on camera. And Usher's like, dude, I'm in for all 3 days. But for me, one of those days alone, I wear an odometer and I'm Fitbit, and it's 26.5 miles on average.
Wow.
We start at 8:30 in the morning. I finish at 1:30 or 2. There's 1 hour break. People can vote with their feet. No one leaves. There's on average 20 minutes of just crazy ass standing ovations, music stuff that happens at the end because people are just, it's like a rock concert. It's so much fun. But the wear and tear of doing, basically marathon after marathon after marathon on the weekend, back to back, it's pretty intense. And so over the years, it's like the inflammation in my body, the demands, I've had to do everything I can to reduce it. Nothing has come close to cryotherapy. Cryotherapy was developed in Poland and Eastern Germany, and the Eastern Bloc countries. And what it does is it uses nitrogen, so there's no water. Mm-hmm. And unlike an ice bath, what you do, you get spasms, and you got to do them still, right? Yeah. If you're a boxer, you're a runner, you're an athlete, which is what I would do before. Hated them. There's none of that process, but it reduces your body temperature to minus 220 Fahrenheit. And you do it 3 minutes, and it's mind-boggling. In fact, I have one here, and I'll throw you in at the end if you want.
I would love to. That'd be great.
So I have a unit here. I'll do it for you. But what it does is, and I do it about 3 times a week usually. And when I come back from an event, I do it, a couple days in a row. And what it does is it takes all the inflammation out of your body, and you know what inflammation does to every aspect of the body in the breakdown. But it also, it sends emergency signals to your brain. It's like resetting your neurological system. Because your brain's going, you're going to freeze to death. It sounds horrific. It really isn't. You'll find out it's not that painful. Going in my cold plunge at 57 degrees feels more jolting than this does, even though it's colder. Because, the fluid of water versus the nitrogen around you is different.
Right, the connectivity.
The connectivity, exactly right. And so, but what happens is, your nervous system gets a signal, so it's like everything in your body connects because it's like emergency. Every part, it's a reset of your nervous system. You get an explosion of endorphins in your body, which is really cool. So you get this natural high. You feel this physiological transformation, and you get the reduction of inflammation. What it was used for originally is for people with arthritis. And I found my first one because my mother-in-law was be calling up and she was just crying in pain and no medication was enough for her. And I hate somebody medicated anyway. And so I started doing all this research, and it just started to come to the U.S. And now the LA Lakers, most football teams, it's spreading like wildfire amongst the sports teams. And so that's where it took off. So I went and got her one, and it took her, I think, 3 sessions, and she's out of pain. And now there's not a day she's in pain. Now, most people can't afford to go buy a unit, but there are local places now that are popping up all over the United States where athletes go, where people go for rejuvenation. It's amazing for the skin. But it's one of the great things. I got it for her, so I got it for me, and then now I'm addicted. So I've got one every, and in 3 minutes.
What type of unit? Do you know the actual model or the brand that you use?
Yeah, there's 2 of them, the best out there. It's, was it Java? Junka, Junka, I think it is. I'll get it for you when we go downstairs.
And I'll put it in the show notes for those of you who
if anybody wants to do it. But also, like, if you're in LA, there's a place there on, I'll give it to you and put it in your notes. A couple of the locations there. There's some great guys. I'm getting another unit. This is brand new home. So, and I'm building an additional guest house and additional size gym and so forth. I'm getting a unit though that's better. This one just goes up to your neck. But I'm getting one that encloses you a full room. And the reason is, about 70% of your nerve receptors are from the neck up. So when you step into one of those, it's even more powerful. But other than that, I don't do much unique or different with my life.
I don't believe that entirely. I'll keep digging. But, so you have either the sort of contrast therapy that you mentioned, the hot, cold, the cryotherapy.
Yes.
You have salad and fish.
Yes.
How far after? So, if you were to kind of spec out the first hour of your day?
Well, the first every day, I do the water, I take in the environment, and then the first thing I do before I do anything else in my day is I do what I call priming. And priming to me is different than meditating. I've never been really a meditator per se. I know the value of it, but the idea for me of sitting still and having no thoughts just didn't really work out for me. It was just a pain in the ass. And I just thought it's not natural, right? It's like, that's where it works. But when I'm in nature, I feel that form of meditation. When I stand on stage and someone stands up and my brain, it's done. I don't even know what it is, but person's suicidal. I've never lost a suicide, for example, in, 37 years. Knock on wood, doesn't mean I won't someday, but I never have out of thousands, and we followed up with them. So it's like there's something that comes through me, and it's quite meditative. It's like I experience it as a witness, afterwards. It's one of the most beautiful gifts in my life. So I know that meditation. But for me, what priming is, if you want to have a prime life, you got to be in a prime state. And weeds grow automatically. I don't give a damn what it is. My teacher, Jim Rohn, used to say that. And so what I do is I get up and I do a very simple process. I do an explosive change in my physiology. I've done the water already, right? Cold, hot. And then I do it with breath. Because I know all forms of Eastern meditation all understand that the mind is the kite and breath is the string. So if I want to move that kite, I move the breath. So I have a specific pattern of breathing that I do. I do 30 of these breaths, and I do them at 3 sets of 30. And that creates a profound physiological difference in my body. And from that altered state, I usually listen to some music and I promise myself 10 minutes and I usually go 30.
And do you do that in this room that we're sitting in?
No, I do it all up. This one room is where I do it. This has got a great vibe. I'll do this one. I do it at night. I usually will go outside because I love the wind on my face and I love taking the elements and so forth. But I do it in multiple places. I'm on the road. I do it. Doesn't matter what day. I do not miss priming. The reason is I'm not, you don't get fit by getting lucky. Right. You don't get fit by working out for a weekend. You live your life that way. Fitness is because becomes just part of who you are. So what I do during that time is I do 3 simple things, and I do it minimum 10 minutes. 3 minutes of it is just me getting back inside my body and outside of my head, feeling the earth in my body and experience, and then feeling totally grateful for 3 things. And I make sure one of them is something very, very simple. The wind on my face, the reflection of the clouds that I just saw there. But I don't just think gratitude. It's like I let gratitude fill my soul. Because when you're grateful, as we all know, there's no anger. It's possibly angry and grateful simultaneously. When you're grateful, there is no fear. You can't be fearful and grateful simultaneously. So I think it is one of the most important power emotions of life. And also, to me, there's nothing worse than an angry rich man or woman, someone who's got everything and they're pissed off. I want to
surprisingly high number, though.
Yeah, it is, because they develop a life that's based on expectation instead of appreciation.
Agreed.
And I tell people, you want to change your life fast, then trade your expectation for appreciation and you have a whole new life. So every day I anchor that in and I do it very deeply and emotionally. Then the second 3 minutes I do is a total focus on feeling presence of God, if you will, however you want to language that for yourself, but this inner presence coming in and feeling that heals everything in my body, my mind, my emotions, my relationships, my finances. I see it as solving anything that needs to be solved. I experience the strengthening of my gratitude, of my joy, of my strength, of my conviction, of my passion, and I just let those things happen spontaneously. And then I focus on celebration and then service, because my whole life is about service. That's what makes me feel alive. So I flood myself with that, with a breathing pattern that I take that does the opposite. It takes the breath down through my body and back up again. And then the last 3 minutes are me focusing on 3 things I'm going to make happen, my 3 to thrive. And I have some big things that I'll do, and sometimes I'll do things that are smaller, but I see them, feel them, experience them. So it's a really simplistic process. It's 10 minutes, but I come out of it in my power. It doesn't matter if I had 2 hours sleep. I'm now ready. It doesn't, and I do this even when I have no sleep. That's how committed I am. And as I say, I've always said, there's no excuse not to do 10 minutes. Right. If you don't have 10 minutes, you don't have a life. Right. And that's how I got myself to do it. And now that I've done it, 20 to 30 minutes is almost always what it is, because it actually feels extraordinary.
And where can people learn more about the breathing pattern, or could you describe it briefly?
I'm putting a link online because I just started to share this just recently, and I'll get it for you. I don't know what it's off the top of my head, but it'll be up shortly, I think this week.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. And I will also put that in the show notes, guys. So that's just 4hourworkweek.com/podcast, and you'll be able to find this episode. I have to ask, what type of music do you usually listen to?
I have a variety, but for that meditation, I have one in particular, which is a oneness meditation that a friend of mine made it, who's from India, that I find really profound. It has no singing in it or anything like that. It's just the sound of a vibration that's going on, and I just love it. But that's what I'm doing currently. In the past, over the years, I've used all kinds of different pieces of music, but I don't use modern music or pop music or rock music. I do that to work out, right. Rap. I don't know, it just feels weird to be doing rap while you're meditating. But again, what's different is I don't look at it as meditation because I look at it as it's priming courage, love, joy. It's priming gratitude. It's priming strength. It's priming accomplishment. It's priming, when I'm doing my gratitude piece, I'm doing the circle of who's closest to me and, circling that out to everybody I love and sending that energy and healing out to them as well. So to me, that's, if you want prime time life, you got to prime daily.
Well, I like the term priming also because I think that most people who struggle with meditation or even attempt to use meditation are utilizing it for that purpose. They're doing it first in the morning. And, when you said if you don't have 10 minutes, you don't have a life, it reminded me of something that Russell Simmons said to me, which was if you don't have 30 minutes to meditate, you need 3 hours. And I don't always do 30 minutes, but I do meditate in the morning. And it's been a very consistent pattern through among all of the people that I've interviewed so far on the podcast.
Really?
Practically 100%.
Wow, that's wonderful.
And of course, We'll get to Ray Dalio, but also a very avid meditator.
He's coming with me to India in a couple weeks.
Well, that'll be an amazing trip, I'm sure.
For a week of this experience.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
When people hear the name Tony Robbins, I think many different people have different assumptions or images in their heads. What are the biggest misconceptions or the biggest misconception about you?
Oh my God, there's so many, right? Depends on who you talk to. When you've been in the culture at any level for any period of time, people put their projections out to what you are. And then also, I didn't help myself. I did infomercials for a period of time. But, I didn't want to do infomercials. It was just, I had these insights and skill sets and I didn't have it. If I was a great singer, which I'm clearly not, there was a distribution channel, right? I could do that. And if I wasn't bullshitting myself, I could rock the world. But in my world, it was write a book, which most people don't read, go do some speeches. So I looked around and saw these silly-ass infomercials, and I said, these guys are a disaster. Tommy Vu, come be on my boat and watch me get these women, and I'm rich. And I'm like, oh, my God, it's disgusting. So I thought, if you really did something that was real and the kind of people I reach, I don't have to pay for endorsements. They'll do it. Maybe people start to understand this is real, and maybe it'll help me reach people. And it did. It got me Bill Clinton. It got me Princess Diana. It got me a pretty amazing group of people at that stage. But also, you're known by the company you keep. So when you're between spray-on hair and, whatever,
rotisserie
fake
chicken.
Diamonds, then you're seen as that. And also I talk fast. I'm a passionate son of a bitch. And so I'm not talking fast because I'm trying to sell something. I'm talking fast because my brain functions at that speed, right? That's how my brain goes. Slowing it down is just so boring to me. The faster I go, the stronger my brain becomes, the quicker I can come to solutions. So, when I'm most excited and want to serve people, it speeds up. So that helps when you got a room of people where you can move and modulate that energy. But when you're seeing somebody on TV and they look like they're a crazy son of a bitch and they're 6'7" and they got hands bigger than your head, you start going, who is this guy? But the people that have actually, like yourself or Mark Benioff or, President Clinton or whoever, who've, actually entered into my work, once they enter my work, they go, oh my God, this is very different. So I think most people think I'm an infomercial guy or a salesman or a motivator. I hate the word motivator. It is the bane of my existence. Because I've never been that. I don't believe you should just go pump yourself up. I believe in intelligence. I believe see things as they are. If you can't see it as you are, you can't lead, right? But don't see it worse than it is. So you got an excuse not to try. And that's what most people do. They make it much worse than it is because they're afraid of failing. So they come up with a reason why, a story why it's not there. And I don't tolerate that shit. I'm not the guy that says, there's no weeds, there's no weeds. I'm the guy who goes, let me show you what the goddamn weeds are and let's pull these son of a bitches out right now and stop bullshitting. Let's do it. You and I'll do it with you. That's my approach. I think most people think it's a pump-up approach because, the media sees 10,000 people in a room and they're jumping up and down and, what is this piece? So that's because I believe that learning, I believe what I do for people at its essence when I do events is E-cube them. E-cube is I entertain them first because people in our society want to be educated, but they much rather be entertained. Mm-hmm. So if I can rock you and get you to have an experience where you feel fully alive, then, and it doesn't matter who you are, you're from any stage of life, any socioeconomic background, then I'm gonna be able to have your education go deeper. And then, so that's the second part. I give you the best education, the best tools. And the third one is I empower you. While you're in this state, I get you to do things that you won't forget. Do things that will be in your body. Do things that create momentum. So I think the misconception, at least in my perception, is they don't realize I'm really a strategist. I consider you a strategist. I know you're inspirational and everything else, but being inspiring is nice. It's like motivation is nothing wrong with it. It's like a warm bath. You should take one or you stink, but that's not enough. And that's never been what I've been about. But, most people in our society are interesting. It's like if you're looking to improve yourself, people in our world think that's natural. The average person's like, what's wrong with you? I remember I took a company public when I was, 39 years old. Had a really wonderful hit, $400 million. I mean, it was really extraordinary. And the man who ran my company, had been the former CEO of CBS, brilliant guy, Peter. And Peter, at one point, while we're in the midst of this company, he said, I want to go to Harvard and I want to take this extension course. Very wealthy guy, been head of the largest networks in the world, and now heading up my company. And I remember 3 or 4 people were like, well, what's the matter? Why is he doing that? Has he lost his edge? I mean, it's like, versus life is growth, baby. If you don't keep growing, you're going to die. But most people are afraid of the unknown. They're afraid of, I'm not looking good. I'm afraid to fail. And so that creates a challenge. But so I think the answer to your question is, they don't know that I'm a strategist. They don't know how much I really care. They have no clue the depth of what I teach or the diversity of what I teach. Subject, your body, your mind, your emotions, relationships, your finances. They don't know the real impact, or they don't know who I really work with. The assumption is he's taking over weak people's minds and pumping them up and giving them all this enthusiasm.
Casting spells upon them.
I mean, that's crazy shit. But I'm not here to try to dispel that. What I try to do is, the reason I'm still here is, the more people you touch, the more you reach. I don't have to do that. The people that have been through my events are the greatest people to balance that out. And social media, it's been really wonderful because people say, well, this is what this guy is. And 12 other people go, you've never had experience. Let me tell you what this really is about. And that's really been a wonderful enhancement to my ability to reach people with social media.
No, I just to reiterate something you said about inspiration being necessary but not sufficient. I think that, like you, having the label sort of motivation or motivational speaker applied to what I try to do is very frustrating, because one of the things that differentiates...
They put that label on you too?
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that.
It's just an easy label to throw around.
I know. It's like, what else are you going to call it?
It's like, well, I'm not going to read the book, so I might as well find a label that I can understand. And I was going to say, at least you had an infomercial, but at least you weren't selling the 4-hour work week on those infomercials. You'd have twice the level of hell that you already get. But the difference in your material, because I really wanted to better myself when I was hitting some very rough spots in my first year out of school. And the difference between, say, Personal Power and a lot of your other material, including the new book on money and finance and investing, which you guys at some point, I'll try to share some of it with you, but I would say probably 20 to 30 printed pages of notes in Evernote.
Wow.
Just on I still have about 50 pages left, but it's a big book. We'll get to that. I was felt like giving you a pat on the back. It's like, oh, another 600-page book. I know how these go.
Build your biceps with this baby, right?
But you give very tactical next steps at the proper time. So you do sugarcoat the medicine a bit by capturing people's attention, and not to make this Glenn Ross, AIDA, but you have to have those elements in the proper sequence, or you can't elicit action from people.
That's right.
And that's something that you've had huge. You've been very influential on my teaching, which is how I would view my writing, because of that model. And so if you look at, say, the 4-hour work week as one instance, the reason that I have these comfort challenges at the end of each chapter is because I know I'm going to have big asks later, and I want to condition people to take action. And I think that your materials, it's some of the best in the world I've ever seen in that capacity.
I want to say something about what you said, because it's really important, and you're one of the few people I've heard actually notice it. And I've noticed it in your work, and I didn't know it was influenced by me in any way. I'm complimented by that, but I think you probably would have got there on your own just by the nature of your thinking. The dog bit Johnny, Johnny bit the dog. Same exact words, different syntax, totally different experience, especially if you're Johnny. Yeah. And people don't realize that sometimes when they think I'm 30 pounds overweight and I'll never get this, I've tried everything, or every relationship sucks. How do I end up with men or women like this? Or, this is my third business and I'm still not there, and I don't see how it's going to happen. They don't realize that victory is near. And the reason is it feels like a million miles away, and they're doing the right things, but at the wrong time. Or they're doing the wrong things, they're doing the right things in the wrong sequence, what I mean? So timing is so invaluable. And some of that, you and I know we can't control. Some of that's frickin' luck.
Sure.
But the more you study, how things grow, whether it be organizations or human beings or families or communities, or the way in which people, study ontology or study of knowledge, there's a sequence. And it's like, if I know somebody's phone number and I dial the wrong order, I don't reach them. but I do that same exact ingredients the right order. And that's what people need very often. Often they just need a slight twist and they don't know it and they give up. And so part of my passion is to help people find that 2 millimeters, that little tiny shift that changes it all. I have these people that I've coached over the years that are the best in the world at what they do. And I'll take on clients who I think by touching them, I can touch a mass number of people. That's why I started with Paul Tudor 21 years ago. And it's turned out really well with his Robin Hood group growing to giving away $1 billion over this time and the impact that it's had. But one of these people is one of the top, to give you an idea, facial surgeons in the world. And I remember I went to go see him one day for one of our sessions, and he was late, and I'm waiting, and I'm no problem, I'm busy. And the nurse says, he's going to be a while. He said, Dr. Huffman said, why don't you come in and watch? And I said, wow, love that. So, I get all scrubbed up, the whole thing, come in. He's got rock and roll music in there, and this guy is like an artist and a scientist mixed together in the most powerful blend with a giant heart. And I go in there, the music's blared. He's, hey, Tony, how you doing? He goes, watch this. And he cuts this one. He lifts this woman's face off.
Oh, Jesus.
And I felt a little state change. And I was like, I stayed around for a few minutes just, to put up that I can handle this shit. And I said, I got a few calls I got to make. Right? Got the hell out of there. So I go into his office. He goes, just use my office to make your call. So I'm recovering in his office.
Puke in the basket, and then you're using his office.
I'm not a squeamish guy, but I just wasn't prepared, right? So I'm sitting in his office, and he's entered a stage of life where, this is a guy the Sultan of Brunei paid $2 million to fly him over like 20 years ago, to do 2 of his family's faces. This is a guy that anybody in Hollywood who had the money, in those days, there was nobody but him the best on earth because he'd mathematically figured out how to trigger beauty by what you and I would call submodalities. I think I can shorthand for you, an NLP term, right? Yeah. Those little triggers in the visual triggering device that affect kinesthetic change in a human being. And so I'm sitting at his desk and he's got this manuscript. So I'm curious, the manuscript he's working on, and he wants to finally teach other surgeons because he's so old, he doesn't want it just himself anymore. He wants his material not to die. And he's got maybe 150 pictures of the most beautiful women in the world in the last 20 years, across culturally around the world. Stars, movie stars, different countries. Then he's got the same thing for men. And then he's got all these drawings, and he showed that, this is ironic, he goes through and he shows that he makes no more than 7 changes ever. And the biggest change he makes is 2 millimeters. Huh. And yet, I saw an 84-year-old woman that looked like she was in her early 50s and gorgeous, and that's all the changes he made on her. I'm telling you, it's mind-boggling. Like, for example, he knows that the measurement of the pupil of a woman's eye, if you measure that size, and you measure the distance below your nose to the top of a woman's lip, this is only for a woman, if that measurement is smaller than the pupil of their eye, men, when they look at this woman's face, are driven and sexually attracted to her. If it's the same size of pupil, there's attraction. If it's just 2 millimeters more, she has an average face. If it's more than 2 millimeters more, her face is what he calls butt-ass ugly. That was a technical term used at that point, right? but so when I tell women this, they start measuring their eye and stuff. So he makes this little change, and it creates that puckered feeling that men don't even know why. It's instinctive. It's just a triggering device that's instinctual. So he knows the 7, he knows the 2 millimeters. And it's like, you take somebody 84, 50 and looking pretty damn hot, maybe not to a 20-year-old, but a 30 or 40 or 50-year-old, certainly. It's mind-boggling. So I've always learned, it's like golf, right? 2 millimeters, the difference between, shanking way over here or putting it on the green. So that's the whole thing. Victory is near, but you've got to know that very often syntax is all that has to change. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with the core ingredients. Got to sequence it differently.
Yeah. So you mentioned a few things. The first is that hand bigger than someone's head or face. I think that for everyone listening, at some point I would like to see if you can actually palm my face, and I'll put that out on social media because I'm pretty sure that you can, and I'm sure everybody would love to see. There are probably a lot of people listening who don't like me very much and would like to palm my face, so Tony will step in for you later. I'd love for you to mention a little bit about the new book and just sort of a very basic overview, and then I have a bunch of specific questions because this is the first book in 20 years?
20 years.
20 years.
Yeah.
And I've read pretty much everything that you've put out that I'm aware of.
Yes.
And I guess part of me thought a few things when I saw that this book was related to money, and also referring to it as a game in some ways. I thought, number one, what hasn't already been said? There's so many books.
That's what the publishers
There's so many books on money. And I think that perhaps undeservedly so, I feel like I understand a lot as it relates to investing in money. And I've read David Swenson. I've read about his allocations. I've read the annual letters of Warren Buffett. I read the letters to shareholders from people like Howard Marks or other hedge fund managers. I know some of those guys. So I saw a couple of names pop up that I recognized. And and you said in the very beginning of the book, and this is I've tried to do stuff like this in the past, so I realize how hard it is. You're trying to write a book that the neophyte, someone who's never taken their finances seriously, will derive a lot of value from. And yet at the same time, you say even very sophisticated investors will be able to get a lot out of this book. And I thought to myself, oh boy, this is really talking a big game.
Yeah.
And the interviews at the end of the book alone are worth magnitudes of order more than the book itself. I mean, you've got Bogle, you've got Ray Dalio, who runs I believe it's still largest hedge fund in the world.
Largest mutual fund with Bogle, largest hedge fund with Ray Dalio. Carl Icahn, who's, Time Magazine put him on the cover as master of the universe. This guy that sends out one tweet and Apple goes up 17 billion in an hour, right? It's up 50%. He was out doing it again today. I don't know if you saw. Carl's quite a character. Two things. One, commenting what you said. That's the challenge I love. When I do my business mastery programs, I bring people in from usually somewhere between 15 and 30 countries. I translate 4 or 5 languages. They're different financial systems, but business, the psychology and the strategies of business, it's a worldwide game.
Yeah.
And so I bring people in there that are brand new. They come in like just starting a business, and you got people in there like HomeX, largest home builder in Mexico, is one of my events, $1 billion business. And they credit me with $750 million in increase in 2 years, almost doubling their business. And I take this chiropractor or this dentist, army of 3, and show them how to double their business in 6 months. So I love that challenge of how do you hit both. And it's not easy to do.
It's very hard.
And thus far, I think we pulled it off. We pulled it off primarily because of it's not me doing the teaching. It's me going to the best on earth and getting them. Simon Schuster told me the same thing. People say, why didn't you write a book in 20 years? What the hell have you been doing? Well, about every 4 days I'm on an airplane. I see 250,000 people a year in 15 countries. That's what the hell I'm doing. And I live for that environment, the rawness, the aliveness, every moment something's changing. You never know who's going to stand up. You don't know what the challenge is going to be. I mean, that feels alive. And also, it's just real and it's now. And if it's not working, freaking change it. Who cares? When I go to write, as I did 20 years ago, I'm sitting still. That first alone makes me crazy. And then number 2, you took away my hands, my music, my voice, my face, my intensity. And now I just got written words, which I clearly am not as skilled at. But when I concentrated on it, I am. But I also go, this is immortal. I can't improve this. It's like once you write the shit, it's done. So I've avoided it like the plague. And then also, most people don't read, frankly.
Yeah, it's true.
They read blogs. It's like most people, I can see a generation looking at this book. It's 630 pages, right? But it's these 7 steps. So you can do a chapter a day, and in 30 days, you got a different financial life. That's where, if you're crazy like me, you'll do it in a weekend, But what's interesting is they'll say, why don't you put this in a blog? Why don't you put this in an infographic? Mastery doesn't come from an infographic.
Yeah.
What you know doesn't mean shit.
Yeah.
What do you do consistently? And you got to go through stages of understanding intellectually, which anybody can do, but you got to do. And then you got to get where there's enough emotional intensity attached to that understanding that you actually do it. And then you got to get enough consistency of both those that it gets in your body. You don't have to think about it, and it becomes who you are. And those stages of mastery require, it's like I took Taekwondo. I didn't want Taekwondo. I wanted to learn Aikido because I thought it was a beautiful art, and I like the idea they don't have to hurt somebody. 10 people attack you at once, and it's like wonderful, So I learned some Aikido, but I had the privilege of being exposed to Grandmaster Jun Rhee, who brought Taekwondo to this country. And he trained Muhammad Ali, and he trained Bruce Lee and his acupuncture and so forth. Amazing history. And a beautiful man, like the most happy human being you ever meet. And he loved me and what I did and was touched by it. And he said, would you like to do this? And I was 23, 24. So I said, yes, but I must get my black belt fastest time in human history, and you must come travel with me. We will do this every day. Kind of like your insane ass.
Right. Yeah, I read your book in 2 days.
So it's like, it's completely insane. So he came in, I'd finish being off stage at midnight or 1 a.m., and then I'd have to go train from 1 to 4, and then I'd sleep from 4 to 7:30, 3.5 hours, 4 hours, sometimes 8 if I could squeeze it, get up and do my next day. I did that for, 9 months. I did get a black belt legitimately in the shortest time in history, but I hated it and never wanted to do it again. But I'll never forget, I was doing these moves, and it's like, gee, it's 4 a.m. I'm doing the same freaking move, and I've done it over and over and over again. And I said, Master Ree, I said, can we go to the next move? And he said, Grasshopper, this is the next move. And he started to laugh. He goes, the fact that you think this and this is the same move is why we're still doing it. It's but you know what? It was really true. So I'm into mastery. And so what I really wanted to make sure happened with people is that we got them to that place. And when I went to Simon & Schuster, it was a crazy thing. So I'm doing these events. I'm loving this. Simon & Schuster's been begging me for a book for decades, a huge contract. And he made it bigger and bigger. And I said, I don't need the money. I'm not doing it for the money. So they finally came back, and what triggered me is I saw this documentary called Inside Job.
Yeah.
Did you see it?
Great.
Yeah, Matt Damon did the audio on it, and it won all kinds of awards. But what's happened, if you didn't see it, I really recommend you see it, but I do want to prepare you. At the end, you're either extremely pissed off or you're really depressed, depending upon your personality. And I was pissed off because they show how a small number of people basically put the entire economic world at risk. And when they put us near imploding, the punishment for that was to reward them by putting them in charge of the recovery, printing more money, and then taxing everybody else on earth and giving their money back. It's the greatest thievery that's happened in human history. And so I thought, this is making me angry because there's no solution. And I thought, there's got to be a solution. I thought, you know what? I got access. The one thing I got access, because I've called, Coach Paul for 21 years, and he's never lost money in 21 years, and mind-boggling. His company's never lost in 28 years. I was brought in when he's having a tough time to help take things to the next level. And I thought, I know these people. I know this process. What if I took what the ultra-wealthy and brought it in? So I think I got this great strategy. Go to Simon & Schuster. He's wanted a book forever, and the first thing he says is, no. I said, what, you can't tell me no. He goes, Tony, no. Jonathan is a brilliant man, Jonathan Carp. He says, Tony, you don't want to do this. He goes, people are dying for a book on peak performance for you, dying for a book on anything, but not finance. This category is a dead carcass, is what he said. It's been picked clean. Same things you're saying, right? Ironically. So did the head of the financial division. He goes, there's nothing new to say. I said, that's because everybody's attacked the same way. I'm going to go to the people that know, not the platitudes of the same BS. He actually offered me a larger advance to not do a financial book. And I said, look, I'm not doing it for that. I'm in for this book. And so now he's really thrilled, which is really wonderful. In fact, the head of that division came back and said, I really thought the category's dead. And I had the division. He goes, this is alive. So I'm real proud of it. But I think what's great about the book is there's not a word in there that's coming from me on the financial side. I don't tell you my opinion. Who gives a shit what my opinion is? I want to know Ray Dalio's opinion is. I want to know Jack Bogle's opinion. I want to know what Carl Icahn's opinion. I want to know what Mary Callahan Erdos, who's head of JP Morgan and manages 2.3 trillion with a T. I want to know her opinion. When it comes to the emotional, psychological side, yeah, that's been my baby for 36 years. Those opinions are clearly mine. I'll stand on them. So I'm real proud of what it is, and I think anybody who reads it will be touched. And I wrote it to empower readers of all types, but I also wrote it because I was thinking about a vehicle for righting another wrong, in my opinion. I think the system is clearly, guys, if you read Flyboys or you talk to Michael Lewis or anybody like him, they'll describe to you how high-frequency trading today is so extreme. We've all heard about it, but it's just so extreme. It takes 500 milliseconds for you to click on your E-Trade and say, I want to buy the stock of Apple. And you got guys that have spent $250 million to straighten the lines between Chicago and New York so they could save 1.4 milliseconds. And they're going to trade hundreds, maybe thousands of times. They know you're going after Apple. They know what to do. They make money, little micro profits. One of the HFT groups was going to go public last year, so they had to do their filings. Do you know how many losing days they had in 4 years?
I do not.
One. One losing day in 4 years. It's front running. Yeah. So the system's rigged, but even though it's rigged, you can still win. That's why I wrote this book. I want you can still win, and here's how to win, and here's the people showing you how to win. So I wanted to right that wrong. I wanted people to have an advocate, but I'm pretty passionate about taking care of people that society's forgotten. And I decided initially I wanted to raise my game. They cut $8.7 billion from food stamps last summer. Most people don't even notice it. It's the equivalent of every family who's being supported going without food for 1 week out of the month for 12 straight months. And I've been supporting, my family was fed when I was 11 years old. I had no food. This man came by and delivered a turkey and food, and he was just the delivery guy. It changed my life. It made me believe strangers care, so I cared about strangers. So I've been paying it forward, and I've fed 42 million people in 37 years. This year, I'm going to feed 50 million people. And myself personally, I started with, I'm going to advance the book. I'm not going to wait and sell books and see how it goes. I'm just going to advance all. Then I was like, well, I don't want to do 10 million. I want to do 20 million, then 30. So now I'm doing 50 million, and I'm getting matching funds. I have Feeding America delivering the food, and I'm getting matching funds targeting 100 million people this year alone. And then I'm putting a system in place to sustain that. So doing this book has been opening up doors to thinking larger, because when you're sitting with Carl Icahn and he goes, yeah, I just closed the deal today. I made $2 billion, $2 billion the day I was there. After only 18 months of investment, where he put in, I forgot the number he started, it was a small number, in Netflix.
Netflix, yeah.
Right, he made that day. And he's now putting all this money in Apple, and he does a little tweet and 17 billion of value goes up right away. Or you're sitting with Kyle Bass, who took 30 million and turned into 2 billion in 2 years in the middle of the subprime crisis.
Good at the short game.
He's telling me to do that. It's like, holy cow. I mean, I started learning things, so it changes the scale of your thinking. So anyway, I'm babbling here because what I want people to know is two things. Yes, I think this truly, if you give yourself the gift of this book, it's a category breaker, but it'll show you step by step how to go from where you want to be. If you're highly advanced, you're going to learn out of the 55 plus, I say 50, but it's really 55 plus, Nobel laureates, self-made billionaires, hedge fund guys, biggest in the world. I put the 12 biggest in the book. And, I went to these guys with the promise of a 45-minute interview, and my average one was 3 hours, so I know how you function because I do the same thing. But what was really cool was, you get with Carl, and I get down with Carl, and the first thing he does is he throws the video crew out. It's like, Carl, what's the deal? I've never met him before. He's like, no, I said video crew, but I just changed my mind. Okay, how do we do the interview? Well, we'll do the audio. No, I don't want the audio. No audio. How am I going to do this interview? Just take your pencil and your pen here, get over here. And he said, I'll give you 10 minutes, right? And, now we're dear friends, and it's, 3 hours later, I'm out, pictures with he and his wife, and, and he's saying, you got a way to help change this world. And, and he endorses the book and supports it. So I want people to know that this has been a 4-year journey of going to the smartest people on earth and finding out the vast majority of them are incredibly genuine in wanting the average person to do well. They just didn't think there was anybody who could translate it. And when they saw that I could pitch and catch with them, because I do 18 hours of prep before I sit down with Ray Dalio, they were willing to share things that they'd never shared before. And later on, maybe we can talk about what I learned from Ray Dalio, because it's pretty amazing.
Oh, yeah. No, I do want to talk about Ray, and fascinating guy. I'm so fascinated with the entire world. And there's so many different breeds. This is something that I want to talk about. But you have, say, the Paul Tudor Jones. For those who probably haven't ever seen a very old film, I think it's available like bootleg VHS, called The Traitor.
Yes.
Is an amazing old documentary. Yes. You can find it, but you can see his style versus, say, the high frequency guys or a Renaissance.
Yes.
All PhDs, right? Outside of Wall Street.
That's right.
And then you have the Ray Dalio types. And
but they all have things in common if you look. They all have different strategies. Some are let's shake the tree of the corporate guys and make sure we get more value out of it, right? Or Carl, and some guys are like Templeton. I got to interview him multiple times before he died. It's like wait for the bloodletting.
No, blood in the streets. That's when you invest.
Blood in the streets, but it's like when maximum pessimism hits, that's when you make all your money. That's what he did. And then there's the guys like Bogle, which is it's the index, baby. And these days even Warren Buffett, it's the index, baby. So they all have different approaches, but what's in common, I think, is I'll tell you 4 things I saw that stood out. And one is overly simplistic, and that's why people don't pay attention to it, but these guys pay attention to it. They don't lose. Half the key to awakening is not losing, and they are obsessed. Every single one of them is obsessed in not losing money. A level of obsession that's mind-boggling. And it isn't just these investors, Sir Richard Branson, for example, people see Richard, and he's such an outgoing, playful, crazy guy. He's kind of an introvert in some areas, but when it comes to athletics and taking on challenges, he's out in the world. But, his first question in every business is what's the downside and how do you protect it?
Right.
Like when he did his piece with Virgin, that's a big risk. Going to start an airline. He went to Boeing and negotiated a deal that he could send the planes back if it didn't work out, and he wasn't liable. That's the level these guys think at. So they look to see, how do I not lose money first? Because the average person has no clue. If I lose 50% in 2008, well, guess what? You got to make 100% to get even, not 50%, because your principal's gone down so much. So it's like people don't understand. You lose 60%, it's 200% to get even. Yeah. And so the average person, lives in a world where they try not to lose money, but they're not obsessed. These are obsessed. Second thing they all have in common, every single one of them is obsessed with asymmetrical risk reward, which is a big word. It simply means they're looking to use the least amount of risk to get the max amount of upside, and that's what they live for. So I'll give you an example. Paul Tudor, when I first went to do the turnaround, when Paul was having some challenging times, he'd broken his leg. Think about this. He did better than anybody in the history of the world during the biggest stock market drop in history, literally. And then he went to the mountain, he went to the moon, now what? And so lost a bit of the edge. And got involved in other things and so forth. And now he's got a broken leg. He's not going to the office. And I got to come in. So I had to go watch that film. That's the first thing I did. I went
the white tennis shoes.
I wanted to go see everything about him, study his physiology, the way he used to move, because this guy's not moving at all. What his face was like, how he breathed, tone of his voice. What were the physical strategies? What were the psychological strategies? What were the financial strategies? I got to go, to Druckenmiller and Soros. I mean, the we got access to back then was unbelievable. See, what was he like then to put the plan together to do this turnaround? And when I started making those shifts in him, and you could see the shift happen immediately, it got really exciting. I got hooked on what was going to happen. So as I did this same process, basically, guess what? I'm thinking about two things at once. I did the same process during these interviews. I didn't just look at the trading strategies. I looked at the psychology of what set it up. But here's what I found with Paul Tudor at the very beginning, getting him back on track. When he was at his best, he made sure every single trade had what he called a 5-to-1. That means if he was going to risk $1, he wasn't about to risk it unless he was certain he was going to make 5. Now, you're not always right. So guess what? If I risk $1, make 5, and I'm wrong, I can risk another $1, I still make 4. I can be wrong 4 times out of 5 and still break even. Yep. Their secret is not that they're not wrong. It's they set themselves up where they risk small amounts for big rewards proportionally. Paul, if he's right 1 out of 3 times, he still makes 20%. So the average person risks $1 trying to make how much?
$1.10.
That's right, about $1.10. If I could get 10%, wow, my $1, right? If 20% would be unbelievable. How often can you be wrong?
Not very often.
No, not at all, right? You're in the hole. You're starting from the hole, and you got to build back up. So they're asymmetrical rewards. Like I was with Kyle Bass, and Kyle Bass risked, check this out, in the middle of the subprime crisis, he made $2 billion out of $30 million because he risked, for every 6 cents he risked, he had an upside of $1. Yeah. 6 cents for 100. Well, you could be wrong 15 times, and you're still okay in that area. I mean, he was brilliant to figure it out. He's a genius to figure it out, but that risk reward is why it is. He showed his kids. I said, how do I teach this to the average investor? Yeah. And he said, well, you could teach them the way I taught my kids. And I said, how'd you do that? He goes, we bought nickels. I said, what do you mean you bought nickels? He said, well, I did research. I had this question. That's another thing that all these guys do. They ask a better question. Like we talked about, they get better answers, right? Better quality question, better quality answer. What's wrong with me? You'll come up with stuff. How do I make this happen no matter what? You'll come up with different answers. So his question was, where in the world is there a riskless trade with total upside? Yeah. And he started looking around and he said, I'm worried about inflation. So he decided, well, gosh, of all the currencies in the world, a nickel, what it's made of today, it's not made mostly of nickel, by the way. He said, it's costing the U.S. government 9.5 cents to make a nickel. That's how our government functions. Right? I'm going to spend almost 10 cents to make something worth half as much, right?
The Pentagon plan.
Yeah, that's right. It's the perfect plan. So he said, but you know what? Just the actual material value, right, is 6.8 or whatever it was, 6.5, we'll call it for round numbers. So he said, if I buy a nickel, it's never going less than a nickel unless you believe the U.S. government's gone. So I've got something that never goes down in value. So I got a guaranteed return. I'm not going to lose my principal. But day one, it's worth 36% more than the day I bought it. How many investments can you have a 100% guarantee of no loss and have 36%? I said, yeah, but that's smelt value. And I saw they passed a law a few years ago. I think Charlie Rangel, whoever it was the one who pushed it through. He goes, yeah, but Tony said, that doesn't matter. He said, let me tell you why. He said, look at pennies. When they changed it from pure copper to tin and all the things they've changed, what happened to the old pennies? There's a scarcity of them. And now a penny from those days is worth 2 cents. It's 100% more valuable. So he said that at some point the government cannot continue to do something that costs twice as much. Some point they'll make a change in the materials. And then all these nickels are worth an unbelievable amount. So he said, I was just showing my kids, here's a risk. You need to think different than everybody else. Don't think I have to take huge risks for huge rewards. Think, how do I take no risk and get huge rewards? And because you ask that question continuously and you believe an answer, you get it. So, he said, listen, if I could convert my entire wealth in nickels right now, he said, I'd do it. I said, you're insane. He goes, I am insane, but it's the best possible fundamental investment. He started telling me how to do it. He bought 40 million nickels.
Wow.
He has 40 million nickels. It fills up a room bigger than this, right?
You better be on the ground floor.
And he had his kids dragging him in and everything else, laughing, having fun. I mean, it's like their little treasure room.
So he can legitimately do like the Scrooge McDuck backstroke through a pool full of nickels.
For real, with nickels. so that's asymmetrical reward. I'll give you one more and I'll shut the hell up.
I'm not here for
you're asking me you tell me the differences. I want there are differences. We can spend hours and hours on the differences, but what I think is useful is what's aligned because then it gives something universal that can be applied.
Absolutely.
Right? The other one for them is they absolutely, beyond a shadow of a doubt, know they're going to be wrong. You will look at these talking heads on television and people screaming at you and hitting bells and telling you what to buy, and they're right. The best on earth, the Ray Dalios, right? The Pebbles, I don't give a who you talk about. You want to look at Carl Icahn, they all know they're going to be wrong. So they set up an asset allocation system that will make them successful. They all agree asset allocation is the single most important investment. There wasn't one person in terms of your vehicle that it wasn't the most important thing. No matter how they attacked it, asset allocation was the element there. And the last one is they're lifelong learners. I mean, these people are machines, like you, like me, like Peter, like most of the people you and I share as friends. They just are obsessed with knowing more. And because the more they know, the more they realize what they didn't know, and then they apply that and they go to another level. And every time you think you're the best you can be in anything in life, your body, your emotion, your spirit, your finances, there's always another level. And these guys live by it. And the last one that I found, almost all of them were real givers. Not just givers on the surface like money givers, that's wonderful, but really passionate about giving. And it showed up once they saw what I was doing was legitimate and was really real. Then they're opening up 3 hours of their time with something these guys will never give.
Oh, yeah. I mean, their hours are worth a lot. Saying the least.
Thank you for supporting the sponsors of this show. I've used them, I like them, and I think you will too. 99designs.com/Tim. It's the world's largest marketplace of graphic designers. You can see the projects that I've put up, the competitions that I've spearheaded, including the book cover of the 4-Hour Body. And you can also get a $99 upgrade for free. So check it out at 99designs.com/Tim. Of course, you can subscribe to this show on iTunes. You can also find every other episode in the show notes, links from this episode at 4hourblog.com. That's FOURHOURBLOG.com, and just click on podcast. There's all sorts of other cool stuff, including my interactions with people like Warren Buffett, Mike Shinoda of Lincoln Park. The list goes on and on and on. And I would love your feedback. Let me know what you thought of this show, who you'd like to hear on the show next, and any other thoughts, really. You can find me at Twitter at @TFerriss. That's twitter.com/TFERRISS. And on Facebook at facebook.com/Tim Ferriss with 2 R's and 2 S's. Until next time, thank you for listening. Well, hello there, my dear little munchkins. This is Tim Ferriss. I've had some caffeine since you last heard from me. What you're about to hear is part 2 of a multi-part conversation with Tony Robbins. To put it briefly, Tony Robbins is a performance strategist with clients including presidents like Bill Clinton, Mother Teresa, not making this up, Andre Agassi, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Oprah Winfrey, who calls him superhuman. This guy is a force of nature. If you didn't catch the first part, you might want to do that before venturing in. But really, we jump around a lot, cover a lot of different topics. So if you don't mind your stories as more of a jigsaw puzzle, then by all means, keep on listening from this point on. This episode is brought to you by 99designs.com, the largest marketplace of graphic designers in the world. Here's how it works. You go to 99designs.com. I suggest /Tim for reasons I'll explain. And whether you need to create a logo, a website, a car wrap, a bumper sticker, whatever it might be, a t-shirt, you can put up what you need, a description. Then designers around the world compete for your business by submitting ideas and designs and so on. And in less than a week, you have an original design that you love, or you get all your money back. And I have used 99 Designs for years, including for some very big projects like the book cover, or at least brainstorming book cover ideas for the 4-Hour Body, which went on to become a #1 New York Times bestseller and is in, a dozen plus languages and has sold a gajillion copies. So I have used it when time and money has been of the essence. It is a fantastic tool. And if you go to 99designs.com/Tim, you can actually see some of the campaigns, some of the competitions that I've run. So actual submissions for the book covers and things like that. You can also get a $99 upgrade for free, which gets you more submissions. So check it out, 99designs.com/Tim. And now, without further ado, please enjoy part 2, the final part of the Tim Ferriss Show with Tony Robbins.
And to touch on a few things that you mentioned, for those people asking themselves, as I'm sure a lot of people would. How can I apply what these guys do to what I do? And I think that you present a number of observations articulated very, very well that most people will never be exposed to. For instance, number one, asset allocation does not mean choosing if you are going to be a stock picker or invest in an index fund for the S&P 500, because those are both, you're in one bucket right
That's
there.
right.
You're in a correlated class.
That's right.
And
there's no diversification in that.
Right. There's more to it.
There's diversification. There's maybe more companies, but it's all within the same asset class.
Yeah. And the other thing is that there are ways, there are ways to look at the problem, that are not obvious right off the bat. For instance, you mentioned something that's so simple, but a lot of people miss. If you invest and you lose 50%, you have to now have 100% gain to get back to break even. Put another way, and this is also straight from the book, if you, let's just say you, I think it was investing over, it was either 5 or 10 years. The exact number is in the book, and you had, you'd invested in the stock market through a, let's just call it sort of off the shelf mutual fund that charges typical fees.
Yeah.
And the market moves up and down, up and down, up and down. At the end of that period of time, you're back at the same market levels.
Yes.
You would think if you put in 100 grand, you'd have 100 grand at the end of that period of time. And it ends up that you're 47% down?
Yeah.
For something obscene.
It's the idea of average rates of return. So if a lot of people look at what they've invested and their broker or whoever represents them will show them their portfolio and go, well, look, you started here, you went up 50%, you went down 50, but you went up 50, you went down 50. So your average rate of return is 0. But when I put real dollars in there, $100,000, and you go up 50 or 150, you go down 50, you're at 75, you go up 50, oops, and then you go down, and you end up at $37,000 instead of $100,000 because your principal is moving up and down. So there are all these ways we could do it. The biggest lie, in the book, I walk you through 7 steps. So one of those steps is, frankly, you got to do what most of us guys, that probably people listening on your team already do. And that is you've got to become an investor. You've got to be an owner, not a consumer, right? And the way to do that, frankly, we all know, but very few people do. And that's you take a percentage, you lock it down. You never see it. It's automated and you put it aside for investment and that just occurs. And I show the people some of the tools that Nobel Prize winners have come up with. So if you say, I have no money, you can invest more for tomorrow by committing when you get a raise or your company gets the next level, you automatically have that percentage go there. So it's money you've never seen. It's not taking away money from you, so you're willing to commit to it, right?
And there are ways to automate that.
Yeah, totally automate, which is fantastic. So, they took a group of blue collar workers who couldn't save more than 3%, and they showed in 12 years they had them up to 16% with absolutely no sense of loss. Because, they show this with example, the behaviorists showed me that if you give a monkey an apple, they go crazy. And you give them 2 apples and they go crazy. And if you take one of the 2 apples back, they're angry as hell. They still have the same first apple. Yeah. What happens is if you don't give them that second apple, but it gets invested for them, that changes your world. You don't feel a sense of loss. There's no drop. And yet you set yourself up saving 15, 16, 70% at a totally different world than 3 or nothing, obviously. The second piece that I got through that I brought this up for is, you gotta know, it's great to get in the game, but oh my God, don't get in the game till you understand the rules, till you're an insider. And so I go through the 9 biggest lies, and they're investment lies, they're Wall Street lies, however you want to call them, but they're marketed lies. There's a reason you believe them.
Very heavily marketed.
Very heavily marketed to the advantage, right? And one of those is this idea that they're going to beat the market. Now, here's the real facts. 96%, check it out, 96% of all mutual funds in a 10-year period will never even match the market. Now you're paying a premium. You could have owned an index that cost you 20 basis points, right, at Vanguard, or 14 basis points, depending on what index you're dealing with. Instead, you're paying, they say 1%. You ask people, it's just 1%. In reality, if you go through, Forbes has shown the average mutual fund, when you put all fees in, if you read the prospectus, and there's all these 21B, trading, all these things that they don't call fees very often, but they're money out of your pocket. The average is 3.1%. Now, when you do that, here's the problem. Number one, only 4%. What's your chance of picking the 4% of mutual funds that are going to succeed? If you go for Morningstar, you're screwed, because I can show you statistically, Morningstar's own statistics that show in a 10-year period, out of 250 people that made it to 5-star Morningstar, 4 are left. It doesn't work that way, right? So if you could pick the 4%, if you were magically able to do that, you could do all right, but the 4% is always changing. So your chances of picking the right mutual fund are 96% against you. And the average person's 401k at work, they don't know how to evaluate this. They try and pick it, so they're screwed. And then you get poor performance and you pay somewhere between 10 and 30 times more for the same investment you could have got for 10 to 30 times less. It's like the ultimate insult to injury, and you go, why does that matter? Well, first, let me give you this. So people understand what 96% means, or getting a 4% possible success rate. If you and I play blackjack, most people know how to play, right? 21. You get 2 face cards, that's worth 20 points. If your inner idiot says, hit me, right? When you got 2 face cards, you go 21, you have an 8% chance of success. You have a greater chance of success there than you did if you're going to find the right mutual fund. Now, what's your chance of success in getting financially free when, here's what's unbelievable. If I said to you, here's an investment I want you to try, Tim. Here's how it works. You put up all the money, you put up all the risk, and I will put up no money and I put up no risk. And if you win, I get up to 60% of your entire growth of what you have over the lifetime of your investing. You put up all the money, I take no risk, I put no money in. And if you lose, but I don't lose anything. That's a deal that most people said, I'd never take in a million years. That's the average mutual fund. Because for every 1% you pay, it's 20% over the lifetime of your investments of growth. Because just like there's compounded growth, there's compounded fees.
Right.
So Bogle showed me 60%. I'm saying, Jack, how is this possible? How could people be doing this? Like, he goes, Tony, it's a $13 trillion lie, and it's called one thing, marketing.
Yeah.
It says marketing. So I've been in the business 64 years. It makes me crazy, and people still do it. The vast majority of people put their money in a mutual fund. They had an index fund, and now he's come to, be the largest mutual fund in the world with an index fund now with $2.5 trillion. I mean, Jack has been modified, but most of the smart money is there. It's not the average person's money that's in the index today. So I go through these lies, and what you don't know in the financial world will hurt you. And the one you're talking about is just the average rate of return. You want to be seduced. When you look at the rate of return, Bogle said to me, Tony, whenever you see what the rate of return was, and you're trying to evaluate that mutual fund based on its past performance, just know that number's not accurate. Dalbar did an incredible study, 20-year study. They found the average mutual fund owner over a 20-year period of time made 2.5% net. The market was 9.7%. That ought to give you a sense. So, I went to go do this book, and I won't mention the person's name. Like all these incredible endorsements from everybody, Nobel Prize winners, right? Self-made billionaires, all these guys. There's a particular person that a really good friend of, I won't mention the name, but it was ironic. He wrote me back and said, well, my team's read it, and they really don't think it's that, that's special. I thought, well, I'm not insulted by that, but it doesn't make sense to me. And then I found out this person has 6 mutual funds. Right? So it's like, okay, I get it, dude.
Don't ask a barber if you need a haircut.
That's my fault. I'm so sorry. Never should have asked that
sorry
question.
About that one. Yeah.
I should have told them.
So I should point out to folks also that it's some people are very math phobic. Part of the reason I went to Princeton, and it's funny, I was reading Carl Icahn's story and how he was told he would never get into any Ivy League schools, and he chose Princeton. Same thing happened to me. I was told I would never get in to a whole host of schools because, and this is kind of like your mutual fund guy, humans respond to incentives.
Yes.
And this particular guidance counselor is incentivized for what? To optimize, to be able to say X percentage of students got into their first choice school. So how do you do that most easily?
Lower their expectations.
But I am intrinsically not someone with a lot of math background. Part of the reason I chose Princeton over other schools is because they didn't have a math requirement. Yeah. And I think for a lot of people listening, they may be like, oh my God, percentages and compounding, it's very overwhelming. And I think that part of the reason your book had to be as long as it is, and a book should be as long as it needs to be,
yes,
is that if you were to try to compress it into 100 pages, it would be like watching a 3-hour action movie, but getting a frame every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
You wouldn't, it would be too much in too little space. But when people read the book, when I read the book, you're leading people in a logical progression from building block to building block to building block, so that by the end, people are very, very savvy. And so people who might be thinking, oh my God, this is really a lot for me to absorb.
I'm probably talking 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
In the book, I'm telling you stories too. And I think the stories take it away. So it's not numbers. You go, holy shit. If me and 3 of my friends all put aside the same amount of money and we both get a 7% return, but my buddy's getting fees of 3%, my other buddy's 2 and I'm 1, and we both all 3 of us put $1 million in or 100,000, however you want to do it. The person with 3% of fees ends up with 65% less money, and they got the same rate of return. Yep. They start with the same amount of money over the same period of time. Mm-hmm. And I think when you see that with real people's lives, you start to go, I don't have to know the math. I just know one thing. Fees matter, and I'm going to cut those babies to the absolute base.
Definitely. And I'd love to talk, you brought it up a little earlier, Ray Dalio and asset allocation, because this is something I've been thinking about a lot, considering that due to paper gains, I'd say I have very, 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 very high double digits of my entire net worth in tech. And it's hard, unfortunately, to rebalance when you have a lot of private stock that can't be traded.
In there.
But you know how it is. So Dalio is someone I've been fascinated by for so long. Maybe you could talk about the all seasons and what some of the stuff that you chatted with him about as it relates to asset allocation.
It might be helpful for people to take a second and give people his background. I mean, Ray is not the guy you would think of as master of the universe. He comes from Queens. His dad was a jazz musician. His mom was a homemaker, really lovely lady. He went from, very lower middle class family and decided that he wanted to go work at a golf course. He bumped into, one of the things I talk about is proximity affects your life, who you're in proximity with. And he's around with proximity with the very wealthy people, and they're talking about stocks, and he got fascinated by it and got hooked on the process, and then, got involved in the stock business. But he got involved in a time period when the world was incredibly volatile, the 1970s. We're all shaped by our time periods, right? And so if you can imagine, that's a time we had this massive inflation where Nixon goes on television and says, we're going off the gold standard, that money, as you know it, called the US dollar, we're not going to back up with anything. And he thought for sure the markets would just be destroyed. The American dollar is going to be worthless. And instead they had what was called the Nixon rally. And it's like, it shook him to his core that as much as you think you know, you don't know. And it gave him a lifelong focus that says, I always want to be asking, what do I not know? And how do I understand the system as a whole, not just my perspective on the system? And so he started Bridgewater. And in fact, my friend Paul Tudor Jones gave him some of his initial capital to do this, and is wishing he didn't loan it to him, but would have kept it as an investment, I think, at this stage, because Bridgewater became so gigantic. But what happened was, he's the guy the U.S. government went to when they're trying to figure out how to design tips. I mean, this is the level of design. He's the guy that when McDonald's is trying to come out with McNuggets, and they're trying to figure out how can we make sure we have enough supply of chicken, and he's the one who figured out the math of futures and what to do so McDonald's could even do that. That's the way this man's brain works. So over the years, he built this alpha fund, and it's very intensive, and he's lost money in 23 years 3 times on that fund. And the fund has returned 21% compounded for 23 years. Just mind-boggling, before fees. And then turn around, and after all these years, he said, everybody talks about, at different stages of your life, you want to protect yourself. So you do a balanced portfolio, 50%, 60% in stocks maybe, and 40 or 50%, over here in bonds, because, when the stocks are more volatile, the bonds are going to balance you out. And then he says, but didn't look that way in 2000, didn't look that way in 2000. It all went down 2008, right? So over the years, he said, this is a story everybody buys, but it's not reality in whole segments of time. So he began to pursue what he said, what if I wasn't around? I need a almost passive form of investment. I need something that wouldn't take 1,500 people, that my kids could use, that would support all my philanthropic efforts if I wasn't here. And he questioned everything about asset allocation that anybody's ever been taught, and came up with a different way of looking at it, where he basically said, there are 4 things that move the price of any investment. It's inflation and deflation, and whether the economy is growing or shrinking. And that creates 4 different seasons in which every type of investment, stocks, commodities, gold, real estate, it has an ideal environment in which it grows, and it has environments in which it will absolutely slam. And so he figured out what's the right combination of these things so that I can reduce the risk to the lowest level of loss possible, which, Warren Buffett's rules, everybody talks about the rule, right? It isn't Warren Buffett's rule. It actually comes from his teacher, which was, rule number 1 to investing, don't lose money. Rule number 2, see rule number 1, right? So how do I make that happen? But also maximize the amount upside, as much upside as possible. He called it his all-weather fund because it works in all weather. And he did all his own investing in for 10 years, and he back-tested it all the way to 1925 and said, oh my God, I have discovered something unbelievable. So the only people who got to use this is he, and then finally his clients, the $5 billion net worth, the governments, the pension funds. So I've read about it, and, Ray does very few interviews, as I'm sure you know. You go online, you won't find a whole lot, in front of the Congress, maybe at Davos every now and then. He kind of avoids any publicity and so forth. And I did all my homework on him. Paul Tudor's one of his dearest friends. Arranged to go see him, studied it all out, and I was prepared. And then I go into this meeting, and I started asking him. I asked him the question I ask everybody, which was, if you couldn't pass on any of your money to your children, none, all you could pass on was a set of principles, an investment strategy, and a portfolio, what would it be for your kids? They don't have your skill. Everybody gave me different answers, but his answer was, well, it'd be my all-weather approach. I said, so explain to me how it works. He explained it. At the end of it, just like me telling it to you right now real fast, people are probably going, I don't have a clue what he just said. It seems logical. But the one thing he said is, Tony, is when people think they got a balanced portfolio, stocks are 3 times more volatile than bonds. So when you're 50-50, you're really 90-10.
Yep.
You really are massively at risk. And that's why when the markets go down, you get eaten alive. So he has this portfolio and he describes principles. I said, you know what, Ray? I said, this is spectacular. I understand it. But I said, the only way you really get the result from this is if you know the exact percentages. It's like if you got if you got somebody's recipe and you put in a gallon when they put in a teaspoon of a particular ingredient, you're messed up. So I said, I need the secret sauce.
Yeah.
And he looks at me and laughs. He goes, Tony, that's my business. And that's when he gave me the whole $5 billion net worth and, got to have $100 million. I said, yeah, Ray, but you just got to tell me you haven't taken anybody's money for 10 years. You're not going to take anybody's money. Mm-hmm. He goes, yeah, but, it's really complex. And I said, I know it is, but give me a simple version. And he said, no, it's always changing. I said, give me a version with no leverage that the average person can do. You just got to tell me they go into their broker, go into their wealth manager, and, going to their mutual fund's not going to work. So help a little guy out. I know you care. And I started teasing him. I said, come on, give me the juice. He started laughing. He goes, well, he said, I could give you something that wouldn't be perfect. I said, I don't want perfect. Your worst design will be the best design anybody else will ever come up with, right? So I got him going. He said, well, we might do. And he lays out this simple strategy. Mm-hmm. And I was vibrating. I was like vibrating. I knew what his generosity level was. It was unbelievable. He's never revealed it to anyone in history. And I ran as fast as I could. I got in the helicopter, flew back, went to the guys at Hightower and went to the guys at 2 of the firms. And I said, I want you to run these numbers. Show me the modern period. Show me the last 30 years. What really happened with this formula every single year for 30 years and what's the overall for the 30 years? Because I look at 30 years, 1984, that's when we finally had cell phones even, right? That's when the world started to shift. Show me 40 years and show me 75 years. Take me back right before the Depression even, right? And the guy texted me, I'm in the middle of the night, and he never texts me, and he says, have you seen the numbers? And so I'll never forget, I get up, I call him on the phone, I said, what? No, I haven't seen him. He emails them to me. And Ray was right, 85 to 86% of the time, every time period we look at, between 85 and 86, 30 years, 40 years, 75 years. What that means, and by the way, that's being liberal because the 15% where he lost money, the most he ever lost is 3.95% in 75 years. And that was 2008 when the market was from peak to trough was down 51%. The average loss, including that, was 1.9%. So like, for example, one of his losses is 0.03. Really it was break even, but we called it a loss because technically it's a loss. If you could go to Vegas and you knew that for 75 years, the strategy you used had been successful 85% of the time, and that when you lost, the most you lost was 1.9%, how much would you bet? How long would you, continue to gamble? It's not hard to figure it out. So, I mismatched it. I took it to some very large institutions, and they're like, I've never seen anything like this. So a couple of people said to me, don't put this in the book. This is a business, man. This is a business. This will give you the lowest level of volatility, the highest level of return. It averages just under 10% return with that little volatility. It's mind-boggling. So I said, you know what? That's not the spirit it was shared in. I said, we can do this for people if they want to do it. We give that option, but I'm putting the book so anybody can do it, and it's in the book right then and there. And it's not the only one. There's strategies for everybody, but it's one of the more exciting ones that you'll see.
Is there anything, totally up to you, but is there anything you can share from what he told you about the all-weather?
Well, I don't.
And I will just say as a preface, look, yes. There's so much in this book. Number one, I've had also people say to me, for instance, I'm not going to name any of my close friends, but 4-hour body, blah, 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 that's fine. Give me the index card. And so,
I know.
And I give them the index card, and there's context missing.
Exactly.
And they also, it's not just because they can't in some cases do it because they're missing the detail, they won't do it. So get the book, do yourself a favor.
I'm not holding back on that. I don't think I'm in the damn book anyway. No, the reason I wouldn't share that is because it'll be out of context. But even in the book, I tell people in the first chapter, I tell them this result. I give them one example. And I say, I know the first thing you're going to want to do is turn back to that section of the book, look. And I said, you can do it. But I caution you. There's a syntax. Yeah. There's a sequence. The dog bit Johnny Job the dog. And if you will go through the sequence, it's going to be more. If you know that portfolio, but you don't know truthfully what your risk tolerance is. You don't know truly what your personal goals are. You don't know what you need to avoid on the fee structure and the tax structures, then that return won't be very great for you.
Yep.
And more importantly, you won't go through the psychology. It'll make you actually follow through for a while. But if people want to do it, by the way, I then went to Hightower, which is the 5th largest registered investment advisory in the United States, $30 billion in assets, 13th fastest growing Inc. magazine company, fastest growing company. Amazing. Elliot is the CEO. Blown away by this man. I did an interview with him, and I left there going, this man is committed to total transparency. This man blows out all those fees, all this, to say it in the nicest way possible, screwing over that happens to most clients. He eliminates that. He's a former litigator. He's got a moral code that's pretty intense. I loved him. So I came back and I called him up and said, let's meet again, and met again. And I said, I got a challenge for you. I said, how about you do this for everybody else? He said, what are you talking about? I said, how about for the average man that really needs it? So what are you talking about? I said, bring that ultra wealthy advice to them. Show them on a small scale how they can do what your ultra wealthy client does. He goes, Tony, you can't make money doing that. I said, you don't need to make money doing it. And I'm doing a book. I'm not making money doing it. I said, a part of our life has to be for something more. And I said, I know that's what you're about. I said, but I'm not talking about putting your business at risk. I said, let's use technology. Technology with live people, the balance. Mm-hmm. And so we built together a site. I put them together with this group called Stronghold, which is brilliant. They've been managing my money for me for about plus 7 years. AJ Gupta, he's actually the person that Charles Schwab put on the cover of most magazines for the last year as kind of the face of the 10,000 registered investment advisory fiduciaries around the world and around the country. And the two of them got together, created a site. It's kind of like Check Your Broker. So now you can go online and you can put in all your accounts. It'll aggregate them. It's a patented technology. You get to see, what your real costs are on everything, all in one picture. So there's no BS, versus what you could have the same investments for. Right? It's like, why would I pay more? Second thing it does is it shows you what your real returns have been combined versus what you think they are. And third, it shows you what your volatility levels have been, the amount of risk you're taking, so you know. And then fourthly, it does a comparison to that versus other portfolios, including the one designed by Ray Dalio. And you can go, wow, do I want to do this? If you're a person like half the U.S., less than 25,000 of investable assets, you get to do the whole thing for free. It's given to you, you go do it. If you are not, you have more money, you can still do it for free. You can do it yourself. Or you can push a button and say, I'd like you to become my registered investment advisor, and somebody can do it. So I got to do it saying, most of these people you're never going to see anything from, but wealthy people started not wealthy, right? And so it's really cool. It's one of those few, corny as it sounds, win-wins, right? These guys are adding value. I got them to do it. And now they're proud of it and excited about it. So it's a cool thing. So
what is the URL?
The URL is, strongholdfinancial.com. I got to double check, but I'm pretty sure.
We'll double check that and also go in the show notes, guys.
You got it.
You were saying, to answer my question, I don't want to cut you off.
Oh, which one? I'm sorry.
I've had a lot of questions.
Yeah,
well,
which one?
Well, let me highlight a couple things.
Oh, you answer your question. I said, I don't want to cover it here because even the book I don't do it till you get there. It won't mean anything to you. I'm not holding anything back. You can go to the bookstore and open it up and read it and not pay anything. I don't give a shit. But I think you'd be doing yourself a disservice. What you really want to do is take yourself through the process so that when you get to that point, you can decide, do I want that value to be 20% of what I do, 5%, 10%, none, 50? Because there are many different strategies in the book, and including, as you said, David Swensen. David Swensen is the most successful institutional investor of all time from Yale. He went from 1 billion, took their monies from 1 billion to 23.9 billion, 24 billion now in 2 decades. He's a rock star, nicest human being you'll ever meet in your life, and doesn't get paid 1/10 the rest of these guys. It's his dedication to Yale is why he's there. I mean, he could leave there and be at a totally different place. When he had cancer, the man said, listen, I'm not going anywhere. This is my bucket list, is to be here and to continue to serve at Yale. A man of such unbelievable integrity. And he gave me his exact portfolio. It's in the book also. And he actually gets a higher return, to give you an idea, than Ray does. But you have to go through a hell of a lot more volatility, obviously. So that's why your risk, you see why you got to know what your real, what you think your risk reward is in your mindset versus what it really is. You'll know when you go through the book.
If I can make a request, I would love for you to interview the guy who hired Swensen for Yale, because talk about the best hire of all time.
No kidding.
I mean, just the psychological profile on the guy is so unique.
Yeah.
So a couple of things I'd love to just underscore for folks. The first is, and again, this is pulling stuff from the book. I'm going to paraphrase some of it, but I think it was Dalio who said something along the lines of, like losers react, winners anticipate.
It's actually me, but that's okay.
It's you.
I'll give it to Ray Dalio.
You know what?
It'll sound
take
better.
Take that as a compliment. No, but the point being that and I guess Mark Twain quote is also in there, which was what history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes.
Yeah.
So there are going to be crashes. There are going to be black swan events. And you want to have a plan in place for when that happens.
Exactly right.
And the more you can automate your many of your financial decisions, know when to hold them, know when to fold them, and actually have a plan going in. So if you buy something and have no plan for selling it, you're going to be subject to sort of impulse reactions that will cause you to do what the vast majority of people do. They buy high and they sell low. So what is in this, what we're talking about when we talk about asset allocation, among other things, just to sort of, try to distill it for people as a concept, is that you have uncorrelated or inversely correlated buckets, so that if one portion of your investments goes down because of inflation, deflation, fill in the blank, there are others that go up, which mitigate your risk.
That's correct.
And what you notice, and I live in Silicon Valley, I'm very involved with tech. That's sort of been my sandbox for the last, close to 10 years, I guess. And what you notice about 95%. So talk about venture capital is very similar to mutual funds. So it's the vast majority are horrible. As a class, they're terrible. Yep. However, if you pick the unicorns and you use the same term,
Reid Hoffman or
there are a handful who are very, very consistent. And so what I've tried to do, just like you did with a lot of these hedge fund managers, is look at what separates them. And what separates them is you have the vast majority of tech investors who think high risk, high return, I've got to swing for the fences. I'll be okay as long as a third of my startups lose money, a third break even, and a third make money.
Wouldn't be nice if life worked that way.
Yeah, it doesn't work that way. Whereas the guys who are really good realize that there's a power law distribution. One or two of their investments are going to make up for all of the losses. And the very top of the top, even though they don't talk about it publicly, if they have a lot of their personal money at play, have thought a lot about asset allocation. So if they're heavily vested in tech and it might have an IPO, blah, 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 they have an entire basket of shorts on the NASDAQ or whatever it might be, so that, by the way, it's not always high risk, high reward. If their tech goes to hell, they have enough money that is betting it's going to go to hell that they don't lose a lot of money, if at all, or maybe they even make money.
That's absolutely true.
And so I think
it's a way of doing it that you mentioned. I think your brain may have been going this direction. Maybe I'm wrong, but Ray Dalio actually said something in there that stuck with me brutally. He said, I don't care what it is that you think you're great at investing in or you like. Most people invest in what they like, real estate or stocks or bonds, or what they think they're good at or what they've been raised with. He said, whatever asset class you invest in, I promise you in your lifetime, it will drop no less than 50 and more likely 70% at some point. Yep. And he said, that is why you absolutely must diversify, because you're saying, but I can make so much more in this side. I've had people throughout the years, I teach this bucket theory, this idea that if you want to do is make asset allocation simple, it sounds like such a big word. Yeah. It's just buckets. Some of my money is going to go in a secure bucket. Mm-hmm. That bucket is like a church steeple. It's not going away. It's very secure type investments. Its upside is not gigantic in terms of speed, but you know what? The compounding process, if you give it enough time, those low returns are giant returns still, but you're not gonna lose. And then there's this bucket called, what most people call growth bucket, I call risk growth, because it's really risk first. Yeah. And on that, I'm taking bigger risks for potentially greater rewards. And now the question is, how do I balance these? Am I 60-40, 50-50, 80-20? And that's designed really by three things. Number one, what's your real risk tolerance, not what you think it is.
Yeah, and they're never the same.
They're never the same. I do these wealth mastery programs for years, and invariably I'll do some crazy thing like I'll say, everybody stand up, make change. They look at me and go, make change. And they start reaching in their pockets and making change. And so somebody will pull out $5 and $10, and somebody pull out $100, and someone will come up and they'll take it and give them $5, and they're like, they don't know how to react. So this goes on for 3 or 4 minutes. The music's going on. I go, okay, stop, right, sit down. And I go on like I'm talking about something else. And invariably, somebody's like, hey, wait a second. I want my $100 back. I said, what are you talking about? They said, I want my $100 back. The game's over. I said, when do you think the game was over? Would you think the game had ever gone over? Right? And who said it was your $100? Yeah. Right? And it's like, it takes a while before they finally get, I'm stressed about $100. What do you think is going to happen when you lose $1 million or $500,000 or 100,000 or 10 grand? I mean, your risk tolerance is not what you think it is. So when you find out what your risk tolerance is, and we got great ways to do that in the book, and then you figure out really how much time do you have? If you're younger, you got more time to make mistakes, and so you can take bigger risks. You got timeline on your part. And then the next piece is how much is your cash flow? What's going to be the real flow? If you look at those three things, now you can decide how much goes in my secure bucket, how much goes in my growth. And if you don't make that decision, it's the most important investment decision of your life, according to everybody I interviewed, like what percentage secure, what percentage growth and risk. Then when things come up, you're always going to go for the growth risk. So it looks so sexy and exciting. And I can't tell you how many people over the years have done this. They're telling me, why would I put money over here when I've got this real estate and I'm making 120%? I have a friend that built some of the first big condos in Vegas back in the boom time. And he actually went through my programs, sold the business he had, made $200 million, invested in these condos, started building the panorama towers and places of that nature. And he was up to like $750 million. I kept saying to him, dude, take some of your growth money and put it in the secure bucket, right? How many times I told you this? He goes, Tone, I love you. I made $200 million because of you, but now I'm really like what I touch goes to the gold. I'm listening to his ego and I'm going, I love your brother. But I said, you know how many times I have this conversation? And then guess what happens in 2008? How much do you think he lost? He was worth $750 million. He'd grown that rapidly in those short years. What do you think happened to his net worth?
Oh, I'm guessing it went down according to the Ray Dalio prediction. But,
how about minus $400 million?
Oh,
he didn't just lose what he had; he lost everything at and beyond. So then he's trying to negotiate.
So he was
leveraged.
He was
leveraged out. Wiped himself out. So most people don't put enough in the security bucket is the lesson. And a guy like Dalio provides you a strategy that's got great sustainability. But there are many approaches in the book. But you do have to decide how much is secure, how much is growth, and I show you how to do that in the book.
And I would emphasize, at least, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts, Tony, but for me, it took me a long time to realize what investing represents for me. And it's not maximizing return, it's maximizing quality of life.
Yes.
And there's a big difference.
Yes.
And for me, at least, I have a very kind of barbell strategy where I have super safe stuff and then the startup stuff. But I need to modify that. I want to modify that because it's not currently all seasons at all. And so for people out there, I think, who might say, I don't want to think about it. I would just emphasize that you're making decisions every day about where you allocate your time, your money, your resources. So whether or not you want to call yourself an investor, you are an investor.
Totally true.
And if you make no decision, that's also a decision. Yeah. So it's important to become literate, I think, with a lot of these basic concepts, which is not difficult.
I want to put one thing about that. People need to remember that everybody's a financial trader, but most people are making a bad trade because they're trading time for money.
Yeah.
Worst trade of your life because you can't get more time. We all know it. So what this book will do, if you're willing to just give yourself a chapter a day for a month or go crazy on a weekend, you'll go from maybe not even knowing what these terms sound so complex to being juiced because you'll be an insider. You will look at the world in a totally different way. You'll go, that is the biggest ripoff on earth. That'll never happen to me. That is where I want to go. And you'll make some decisions. And then it's not an everyday thing. Literally, you might do rebalancing once a year for 15 minutes. I mean, unless you're going to be a trader every day, this shouldn't dominate your life, but when did you give yourself the initial education about one of the most important areas of your life? There's only a few areas that really impact the quality of your life. Your body, your emotions, your relationships, your finances, your career, your business, the spiritual side of your life, how you use your time. About a half dozen or so, maybe 7 areas that really affect you. But most people major in minor things. They know so much more about shit that doesn't matter. Yeah. So I'm saying to people, give yourself the gift of just a short burst of time so that you can truly look at life and be good at this area. And if you want someone to do it for you, you can, but at least then you lead them. Yeah. You're not being led by them, right?
No, definitely. And I think that, just like one of the things that sort of changed my world in startup investing was, any company you invest in should be able to return the fund, just as like a general, the amount of money that you're investing over X number of years. And just like the sort of $1 to $5 principle with Tudor Jones. And there are a couple of pithy heuristics, like rules of thumb, that I think will change how you view not just money or stocks, but the world in general, such as assume in the Dalio case that your favorite area, your kind of pet investment bucket is going to decrease by at least 50% in the next X period of time.
50 to 70.
50 to 70, even better.
70 will get your attention.
Yeah, that'll get your attention. And plan accordingly, right? And I think that it's been a very, very fun process to read this and also to connect with you over it. let me ask, if I could, because I know you've got a lot planned, and I also want to finish up the last few interviews in the book, reading the ones that you did. I'm curious if there are any particular funny stories, or what was the funniest story or interaction you had while researching or writing this book that comes to mind?
Well, I think to share one of them already, I think it's funny now. It wasn't until funny in the moment, is walking in Carl Icahn's office, so excited, so prepared, ready to rip open, because this guy, he's got the greatest returns of anybody out there. And very few people know that. Kiplinger did the first review that really showed all the numbers. I mean, if you'd invested in him in 1968, you'd have a 31% compounded return within his firm, versus at Buffett's firm, you'd have a 20% return. People think of Buffett as the ultimate guy. So I got these facts, figures, I'm excited. And to have him literally throwing my video crew out the door and then telling me no audio. And I'm like, how the hell am I going to keep up with this guy capture the notes? So that'd be one. A fun moment was introducing Carl Icahn to Jack Bogle. They didn't know each other, and they're fans of each other. So it's like I came from being an outsider to now introducing them. But most of the time with these guys wasn't as much funny as it was fascinating. It was just seeing the level of they play the game. It's like with a great poker player. They know the psychology, they know the numbers, they know the probability, and you just realize why most people are never going to win, because, they're not going to win gold medals against these guys that are playing this game day and night and day, So, and some of that isn't new to me just because Paul's been my dearest friend for, 21 years now. But it's fascinating to see that in every industry, in every sport, there are a few players that play at the highest level, and they have one thing in common above all else: hunger. But it's an unquenchable hunger. You have that hunger. I see that in you. That's why I'm a fan of your work. It's like you're going to keep finding the answers. No matter what answer you got, want to know more. And every one of these people has that. And it's fun to be around them because there's energy in every one of these people. They have different styles, but there's an energy. And that energy is driven by that desire, that hunger to know more. And
the other observation and that was reinforced by reading the book was that they have principles. They have operating systems that they use. And whether you are trying to lose weight, trying to quit smoking, trying to improve your investment returns, you can insure against your lesser instincts by having a system and putting systems in place so that when you have the impulses that are going to lead to your destruction or eating the cupcake when you shouldn't eat it, that you can mitigate against that. And it's possible you can set these things up in advance. I would love to, before we wrap up, just ask a couple of rapid fire questions.
Sure, go for it.
Okay. When you think of the word successful, who's the first person who comes to mind?
Gosh, I like Richard Branson. I don't know why that's the first thing popped in my head when you said that, only because I think he lives so passionately. He lives life on his terms. There's no bullshit with him. He's having a good time. He's close to his family. Lives on an island like I do. I guess I like to, but he's an extraordinary leverage and very conscious man about society and what to do. His elders program and things like that. He's very socially conscious and yet still has a great time. So he would be one of the first people I think of probably.
What have you changed your mind about over the years? Any positions you've taken that you've reversed since?
You don't have to be perfect in everything you do, including not eating anything enjoyable. That would probably be a big one. My wife would tell you. Over the years, you're always updating. I mean, I don't look at it as changing as much as updating and informing myself. If you thought of it as changing, I think you'd find resistance within your own consciousness or your own identity. And, identity plays such a strong role. You need to be consistent with what you believe. And that's why the political system is so messed up. somebody can actually grow and they're seen as inconsistent.
Yeah. It's a mess.
It makes the political system not grow. It makes the system locked in place. So I don't think there's anything that comes to mind just real directly, but I think there's a constant upgrading. And sometimes it's those 2 millimeter upgrades that provide the biggest impact.
Yeah. Side note for folks, it's also common among the top venture capitalist investors. Mark Andreessen, who created the graphical web browser, one of his mottos for Andreessen Horowitz is strong opinions weakly held. So he's ready to be corrected or update, as you mentioned. What would people be surprised to know about you?
Gosh, you should ask my wife that question. I don't know if some people would not be surprised at all. People in my events would not. I'm a love bug. I'm the kind of guy that I can be brought to tears by seeing someone do the right thing. And yet I'll run through that wall, shake the building with 10,000 people in it. I'm a softie, really, truly underneath it all. That's what drives all this in me.
Okay.
I love to see people lit up. I love to see people happy. I love to see people freed.
So I'm going to ask an unusual one, given that answer. What's the first face that comes to mind when you think punchable?
Punchable. Oh my gosh. Well, I had an interesting meeting with President Obama. It was actually interesting. It was I was invited by Mark Benioff to come. It was for, 15 of the billionaires there in Silicon Valley. I was in San Jose, and it was for the president. It was before the second election, his re-election. And I voted for the president, so I've been a fan of the president, but I was getting more and more frustrated by watching the style of politics, which was, creating greater and greater division. And there seemed to me a great level of inaccuracy and the promises are being made that very hard not to see. And at that time, it was the whole thing, we're going to raise taxes on the rich, and that's going to, balance the budget. And, I've done the numbers. I did a whole video on it. It shows you can kill every rich person in the United States and take all their money and take all the corporations and all the advertising from the Super Bowl. I mean, I do this whole long gig that came from some statistics another man put together for me, but I did it together, and you can't cover the budget for 1 year. And then what do you do next year, right? And so I said to Mark, I said, listen, I support the president. But I said, honestly, I don't know. I can support the other side, but I don't know that I'm a guy to be there. I don't know that I'm a fan. And I said, Mark, you and I are so aligned in so much, but the way in which, how Simpson Bowles was this close and he let it pass. We had both sides willing to make some tough decisions is beyond me. That it lacks the leadership that fundamentally the president of the United States, in my mind, has to have. That's my judgment. I'm just a person. But it's like, I don't understand. Taking the easy route is not something that's going to sustain or grow this economy long term. And I said, and using the political capital, even though I'm supportive of healthcare, using that healthcare where half the country is upset about it and pushing it down their throat and trying to say it's going to cost less money. I mean, it's just like there's certain things. So Mark says, I agree with you. And Mark is the second largest fundraiser for the president. So I said, well, then how the hell you raise all that money? He goes, well, because I feel stronger about him than the other guy. Yeah. And he said, and you and I are aligned with him on so many other things about, the environment and, people's right to marriage regardless of their sexual preference. And I said, of course we are. So he said, come and be there. I said, you know me, I'm totally respectful, but I'm honest. He goes, come. He said, I'll sit you right next to the president. He said, and we'll have a great conversation. So I went to this meeting, and it was crazy. I've worked with so many presidents over the years, but I've not been with Obama. And it's downtown San Jose. They locked everybody in their buildings. And literally, it looked like one of those movies, when everybody's died and there's nothing left but the buildings. It was the wildest thing for several blocks. Took us up in this room. There's nobody else seeing. There's these 16 people, many of which from Silicon Valley. And I listened, and the president came in and was really wonderful. And he shared, some comments and said, I'm not here to give a speech. I'm here. You guys have built the biggest companies in the world. And I'm thinking, not me. I don't fit that category. And so I wasn't going to say anything. And he said, but I really want to hear from you guys. So Mark turns to him and says, well, are you ready for some, real give and take, Mr. President? He said, yeah. And he goes, okay, who wants to go first? And he points straight at me.
That's what friends are for.
So I said, Mr. President, I've paused. I literally paused. I shouldn't do this. I'm not here. They both paid $250,000 to be here. I actually have never done this before. I went 1,001, 1,000, trying to see if somebody else is going to say something. 1,003. I finally said, okay. So, well, Mr. President, I said, I really want you to know I voted for you. I know you're a man of tremendous integrity. I share the same values you do, I believe. But I said, I'm really confused about two things. Number one, how you think you'll be able to have a second 4-year run and get anything done when you have taken the other side and demonized them to a point that they're never going to work with you. And my second question, if I ever get one, would be, why didn't you support Simpson Bowles? Right? I said, it was right there. It needed to be done. And he's long paused, and he said, well, those are fair questions. And he said, first of all, I don't think I've ever demonized the other party ever. And I just sat there and I watched him say it. I was like, are you kidding me? I'm not a Republican, but come on, right? You know, both sides have demonized you. And he goes, and they've been really unfair to me. And he went through this piece. And I said, Mr. President, that's happened with every president, you know, to be fair. You know, that's what they both do. And it's gotten worse throughout the years for sure. I said, but what about Simpson Bowles? And he said, well, Tony, and he, you know, everybody does the research about who's in the room. The president knew. And he goes, well, Tony, you know, your friends, your hedge fund friends, he said, you know, they wouldn't like it if we got rid of, you know, the 15%, you know, tax they do. And they wouldn't, and he goes in, you know, most Americans wouldn't like it if they got rid of their mortgage deduction and, you know, all those things. And he said, I got a better plan. And I said, the better plan is you're going to raise taxes back to Bush on the wealthy. And I said, it takes $4 billion a day to run this country. And you know as well as I do, the estimates of all that money in won't even cover 3 months of this government spending. So it won't solve anything. You're going to have to raise taxes on everyone to cover this. And I said, so how do you deal with that? And so he and I went back and forth. And to be fair, I'm telling my version of the story. I'm sure he'd give you a different version of the story. But there's a point where I felt I'm losing rapport with every person in this room. But I had to be honest. And finally, at one point, the Secret Serviceman came over and grabbed my wrist. And he said, I think that's enough. And to the president's, didn't raise my voice. The president's, you know, to honor him, he said, no, Tony's created some creative tension here. And he said, I'm not used to that in these rooms, but he said, it's a fair question. I said, you know, President, I just want to know because I voted for you, and a lot of people I know that voted for you. I don't know if they will again. I don't know if they need to. You're going to win anyway. Yeah. But I'd really love to know what to tell them about how you're going to govern with this level of division. And so at the end, I just said, well, thank you for your time. And then everybody else got up and asked questions like, will you give a shout to the Jews and you know, things like that. There's no hardballs in there at all, but you know, it's a political environment. So afterwards I thought, oh my God, everybody's going to hate me. And then Reid Hoffman walks up to me, you know, from LinkedIn and says, I can't believe you asked him that question. He goes, I can't believe you asked him that. He said, I've been wanting to ask him that question forever. He just said, that was good on you. And I got all these people coming up to me, giving me a boost. And then the president came around, and when he came back around, he went to shake everybody's hand, shakes my hand. I shook his hand, and I grabbed him with both hands, and I pulled him close to me. I said, Mr. President, I said, I'm not some stupid Republican who's just looking for some tax break. I said, you know, this week I fed 250,000 people in San Jose. I don't live here. I came here to do an event. This is what I do wherever I go. I came from nothing, and I don't forget where I've come from. I care as much as you care. But I said, I'm really concerned about your ability to get your agenda done in the next season of your career if you don't find a way to bridge your communication style with these people. Intelligence is not enough. You've got to build relationship. And he stared at me, and he said, how about you, we're into my chief of staff, and you come visit me in the White House, you and I one-on-one for an hour. And I was like blown away. I thought, you know, I didn't reach him at all. It was mind-boggling. So Mark was right there. He goes, that was unbelievable. That was, I love that. You know, Mark, I love seeing that energy back and forth. You can really help. So then about a week later, they were getting ready for these debates, and the other side called me and asked me if I would work with their particular candidate privately. And I'm not one side of the aisle. I want to see a debate that's real. So I worked with Mr. Romney, and that's the first debate they went in, and he did pretty well. And my invitation was no longer extended. So I wouldn't say punch in the mouth, but I'd say frustrated because here's a man who has such integrity, the President of the United States, and I think a classic human being who cares deeply, smart as a whip. But it's, you know, the failure to find a way to bridge compromise is both sides' responsibility. But in my mind, as a citizen, I think the President of the United States has got to make that happen. And their presidents have done that, and presidents that haven't. And I think it's not his fault. But we're at an impasse politically that is not allowing us to do the things that I think are necessary for our, you know, put our house in order in this country. And easy for an outsider to see it, but as a citizen, we all have a right to opinion. So I don't know if it's thing punch, but I'd say shake him.
Metaphorically, yeah, right?
That might be a better one.
Wow, that's a hell of a story. One last question, and this, I think people are really going to enjoy this, and I can't wait to see the comments and the questions also. I have my moments of doubt, dark moments. I don't know if you have those moments of doubt yourself anymore. Never.
No,
what do you do when you have those dips, when you have those down moments and
those
doubts?
moments I've experienced primarily when I've found an inner conflict that's hard to resolve, and that's been in the past when I'm traveling around the world. You know, I feel like I'm made to do what I do as a human being. I'm certainly not the only human being who can help people, but I'm able to help a lot of people, and I feel it's a privilege, and it's a gift, and something that's earned, and something that is part of grace. And yet the greatest thing in my life outside of my work and my family is my wife. And ironically, when I met her, she had extreme motion sickness since birth. And I spent almost a decade going everywhere because she would throw up we never want to be apart. And she would throw up on the flight up and on the flight down. And she literally lost, I don't know, it was 19 pounds, which she couldn't lose. She was a size 0. I took her to every type of physician. I took her to every kind of natural healer, acupuncturist. I took her to NASA, the expert there. Nobody's able to help her. I took her to the guy who works for the Top Gun pilots, because if they lose their vestibular system, they're dead. So he had this system, and he was the only one who could help her, like maybe 10% of the time not throw up. But the process she did, this tightening in her body, created a constriction in a lymph fluid, and she developed a tumor. Oh. And so the darkest days are, what I think I'm made here to do and is hurting the person I love most, or I've got to be apart. And, as corny as it sounds, I just believed that there was a larger lesson that I need to find a way to break through. And we finally did. And she doesn't love motion, but she no longer throws up on any flight. And it was ironically an experience in India, which sounds so bogus to me, but I experienced it. And she's never thrown up since that time. It's mind boggling. It's this man who's, he's not of any particular faith. It's called oneness. And, he does this form of meditation work where it basically primes your brain to a certain, way of being, and it balanced her body out. Just amazing. But the point of the matter is, I went through all this pain, all this questioning, all this doubt, but I kept asking what's right, what's real, and I trusted my gut, even when it was painful to trust my gut. And I found that that's probably the most useful thing. The other thing you got to do is, it sounds stupid, hydrate your ass off. Make sure you rest, because in a lowered state of energy, you'll doubt everything. And the worst thing can happen if you are what I call energy rich. If you are physiologically at a peak, you can slam anything against you and you'll know. And so that's not to say you won't have those downs, but that's what I try to do. Put my body back in the strongest place. That'll put your mind back there. Your heart is always there. And then ask what's right and live it. And you're going to still make mistakes. And when you do, I think it's forgiving yourself and learning from it and moving the hell on to what's next as quickly as you can, so that experience allows you to help other people. And for me, the worst events I've ever gone through in my life have always been the best events, because I figured if I'm experiencing this, someone else is too. And if I figure it out, I can help millions of people. And that's given me sanity. So I'm not just dealing with my pain or bullshit or whatever the case may be. And that's a big part of my life, is ending suffering, which is impossible, but ending it in areas of people's life is possible. And, as like I always say, it's corny, suffering is optional. Pain, everybody's got pain in their life, but suffering is optional. And I really believe I can help people get out of that. And more importantly than get out of the suffering is to give them an experience of more of the joy that's already inside them. And I live to see that light in their eyes. And I'm going to look forward to seeing you at some point at an event, because you'll have an experience of it. And it won't be this discussion. Discussion's wonderful. Experience is 10 times better. I always tell people, a belief is a poor substitute for an experience, right? You can believe all you want about what you think something is, or investing is, or what China's like, but go to China, get in the experience, go to the event, then you'll know. And I'm a big guy on put people in the experience as quick as they can and let their spirit and their heart and their soul kind of take over. And that's what my life's about.
It's a good mission. It's an amazing mission. Where can people learn more about the book, more about you? Where would you like them to visit you?
I'll give you an address, but they can go to TonyRobbins.com. That's the easiest way. And the book, again, is called Money, Master the Game, 7 Simple Steps to Financial Freedom. And what I'll do is I'll give you a site. And if people decide to do this and they go to Amazon, if they'll send me their receipt, I will give them something I did for people during the pre-publication period, which is I've made 3 videos that are kind of a fast track. So if somebody's going like 600 pages seems like a lot to me. Well, this will get you going. I think for a lot of people, the audio video approach is a good approach to them, and then it'll take them deeper in the book. But I do want you to know that most people, I don't know if you're experiencing this, most people read the book are entertained, because it isn't just like some heavy factual piece. It takes you on a journey, and it's a journey through the financial world, which is wild, weird, crazy stuff happening. It's a journey into the lives of people that started with nothing, that are the wealthiest people in the world, how they did it. And it's your own journey about where you're going to take yourself from this point on, and how you want to live that life, and the experiences that you want to not only have for yourself, but what you really want to give. And that's the greatest thing. I look back and you think about money. Money is nothing but a tool that you either use for a life of service and increase the quality of life for yourself and the people you love, or it's used on you as a weapon. And I'm big on saying time for it to no longer be a weapon used against you. And the only way to do that is educate yourself, and you can do it in a way that's really fun. And that's what this is.
Oh, absolutely. So guys, check out the book. Check out Tony. Tony, you've had a huge impact on my life. And just to the entertainment aspect of the book, I have tons of books sent to me. I mean, dozens a week, as I'm sure you do. Huge stack. A lot of the questions that I asked did not require me to read the book. Yes. And I ended up pushing off probably a half dozen important projects of mine because I got pulled into the book. And I remember I emailed you and I said, it's been 20 years, you still have it. Hot damn. That feeling, the sort of the Tony Robbins response that I had reading your material back in high school. And I remember you emailed me, you're like, high school? How old are you? It's a really fascinating read, and I know some of you listening are my friends who are deep in the world of finance. You will find things, whether it's in the interviews at the back that profile some of the top performers over the last several decades, or within. It's a really fascinating romp with lots of good stories. So, Tony, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks for coming down. Great to meet you in person finally.
Definitely. Hope it's not the last.
All right, well, brother.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for supporting the sponsors of this show. I've used them, I like them, and I think you will too. 99designs.com/Tim. It's the world's largest marketplace of graphic designers. You can see the projects that I've put up, the competitions that I've spearheaded, including the book cover of the 4-Hour Body. And you can also get a $99 upgrade for free. So check it out at 99designs.com/Tim. Of course, you can subscribe to this show on iTunes. You can also find every other episode in the show notes, links from this episode at 4hourblog.com. That's FOURHOURBLOG.com. And just click on podcast. There's all sorts of other cool stuff, including my interactions with people like Warren Buffett, Mike Shinoda of Lincoln Park. The list goes on and on and on. And I would love your feedback. Let me know what you thought of this show, who you'd like to hear on the show next, and any other thoughts, really. You can find me at Twitter at @TFerriss. That's twitter.com/TFERRISS. And on Facebook at facebook.com/Tim Ferriss with 2 R's and 2 S's. Until next time, thank you for listening.